Take it away, Andy. Come on.
Oh, hello, and welcome to
Like
a
clockwork.
new and final episode of the Burning Questions series by Fantasy Football Scout. In this series, Pras and I, Sonaldo, talk about the key hot topics for the week. This week is actually the final episode for Burning Questions. We thought last week was the one, but that was a lie. We're joined by a very special guest in Az, who's had a marvelous season as well. Both Az and Pras in the top 5K this season, while I was in the top 20K. So all three of us have had great seasons. This game week 38 plus episode 25 of Burning Questions will be sort of a season review and kind of, not so much about our teams, but kind of a way to discuss and analyze how you did throughout the season. So for today's agenda, we have first season review, discuss key strategy differences between us three. And we'll also be looking at Jamie, who finished number one. Congratulations to Jamie. What we can learn on hits and chips, how we navigated the 4 phases of the season, and we'll sort of break down the 4 phases as we get there. We'll do a player review. So we'll look at the players that gave us, biggest gains and biggest losses, all three of us, and then what we would do differently next season. And finally, we'll talk about the future. Players very exciting to own next season, prices, chip ideas, and then do a couple of interesting questions and discuss topics such as 5 substitutions next year, which is going to be very interesting. So, with that being said. Pras and Az, how are you doing?
I'll go first, Andy. It's our last one, but not last one forever. It's the last one this season. Yeah. So that's the first thing. And it's been such a pleasure. I mean, we've got such, raving thanks from the community. Obviously, thanks to FF Scout, to Az, Chris for getting us involved here. So we thought, we should end it on a high note in the sense of let's do a review. Let's do it the burning questions way on how we analyze the season. And what we'll go through now in the next hour or so will exactly be that way. We'll analytically think about how the season went and indeed how our teams did in that context, so we can take some learnings in the future. But before we do that, as this is your second appearance on Burning Questions, thank you for being on.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm kind of the host, but not the host. I've got I've got the screen in front of me and I'm pressing the buttons, but yeah, it's very much, of course, your show, so I'm just here. But yeah, it's nice to be here. It's Burning Questions has been a great addition to Scout this season. It's funny how it was kind of formulated, it's a bit like, did you ever watch, like X Factor when they created like Girls Aloud, when they take like different people who have auditioned and then put them together into one show.
Right.
That's kind of like what Burning Questions is like. That's how I see it. Because I think, Sonaldo, we knew you from Twitter and Pras, you did the Meet the Manager with Joe, and we kind of, just all kind of worked. And it's amazing how popular it is, how good the show is, and the chemistry between you two. So yeah, really happy to have you guys on board.
Likewise. Thank you very much. Let's kick off. Before we go to the first topic, I know we don't do reviews, but Andy, how are you feeling? I mean, there's a lot of kind of FOMO within Twitter or the FPL community on kind of the top 10K. How do you feel the season went from a very top level point of view? Your game week 38, actually.
Yeah, I think I was more into the rank probably around 35, 36, 37. And actually, I really let go of it in game week 38. I thought I put myself in a position to get into the top 10K, 11 out of 11 starters somehow, and was pretty excited for it. But at the same time, I knew that a lot of things would have to go right to get there, Pras. So when it didn't work out, I wasn't too bummed. I think it's just a number. Obviously, it would have been great, but moving forward, and we get to next season, you're not going to be thinking about how well you did in the previous season. Plus, as Pras mentioned, I'm really grateful to you as well, because Burning Questions has actually been sort of more exciting in many ways than just the number and the rank. And preparing for this has given me new life into FPL as well. So it has been a fantastic season overall. Yeah,
I think people forget that with content creation in general, because you see some people on Twitter being like, oh, they're just doing it for the money, or they're selling out, all this kind of stuff. But the main reason you get into doing it is because you love FPL, you love talking about FPL, and having your own thing to kind of talk about and create is really exciting, I think. So it's I mean that's the main reason. As soon as you lose that kind of love for it, then it's time to stop doing it. But yeah, as long as you enjoy it, then it's one of the best things, because it brings you into the community. You get the comments and the praise you get from people, and all the people watching make it worthwhile.
Absolutely. And I think, and you said it, Andy, I think, and I wanted to bring that out as well. It's not the end of the world. I mean, these are great ranks regardless. And actually setting your goals, we just kind of create this monkey on our backs. Some people have a goal of 100K, 200K, whatever it is. It's the journey that matters at the end of the day. And it's been a fantastic one. So on that topic, let's get to the first section. So what we're going to do in the first topic is a season review. Now, we're going to compare the 4 teams, which is Az's, mine's, Andy's, and Jamie's, who, as Sonaldo mentioned, won FPL. And we'll just kind of discuss on a very high level how we approached the season, because in the second topic, we'll then get into the different phases within the season. So on a very high level, some of the things that jumped out to me is all of us wildcarded in game week 8. That was the first wildcard that we made. So I'll come to you as first in terms of your wildcard. Is that a normal window that you generally approach? Are you very flexible in terms of how you look at a wildcard?
Definitely flexible. I think game week 8 is probably around the time I think a lot of people aim to play it, because you've seen enough from your players not to feel like it's a kind of a knee-jerk decision of getting rid of the lot. You've got some actual stats behind you from kind of 7 game weeks going in. It was when the transfer window was kind of closing as well, I think, or just after the transfer window's closed. So, players like Ronaldo and Lukaku come in those last minute signings. You kind of get a sense of how the teams are shaping up. So I think it's definitely a good target. But equally, if your team is a complete mess, after 3 or 4 game weeks, there's no point in, and you've got injuries and stuff, there's no point in having it as a kind of hard and fast, got to be this week. Yeah. But I think the majority of people aim to play it around that time. And what's interesting is some people played, Mark, for example, played it game week 8, or was it game week 9, same as me, but went in a different direction with his team. And that ended up being one of the biggest mistakes of his season. Whereas for me, it was it was the catalyst for my entire season. So yeah. It's not just about when you play; it's also, of course, who you bring in, which is incredibly obvious.
Absolutely. Andy, what about you? Couple of seasons in, but is that your typical window? Do you go earlier?
I think last season it was a very late wild card. Do you guys remember that? No, a lot 8. Of people.
Game week 8. I think that's when most people went, and really? I think it was game week 8 because there was a fixture swing for City and Chelsea. So we all came in and we said, okay, we'll have some Man United players.
No, I'm talking about the previous season.
Oh, the season before that. Yeah. Probably.
So that's my short-term memory. That's the sort of window I remember. This season, yes, game week 8 was that, as you mentioned, the fixture to swing. I think Spurs suddenly had some good fixtures. I can't remember the exact teams, but I just went with the norm. I just sort of followed the sheep mentality, but nothing wrong with that. And sort of, I think it was a good time with the amount of fixture swings. But again, I'm trying to recollect which teams had good fixtures.
Chelsea was the big one, because they started the season with they're playing Arsenal, Liverpool, Spurs, City. And then in game week 8, that's when it switched to Brentford, Norwich, Newcastle, Burnley as their next 4. So that's when people were, getting Lukaku in, because, Mark went early for him, for example, but I think a lot of people had Ronaldo and the United fixtures switched round. So people were looking to get Lukaku in, Chelsea defenders were coming in. And then, like Pras mentioned, the City players as well. So game week 8, for example, City had Burnley at home. They just played Liverpool and Chelsea in the 2 games before that. Before that, they'd had Arsenal, Leicester, Tottenham, a difficult start to the season for them. And then it was Burnley, Brighton, Palace, Everton, kind of much easier games. So that was the kind of target, to try and target those, try and target a couple of teams, and also get off the players who, of course, had the easier starts to the season.
Yeah. So I think to summarize, it's generally a good window, and we all agree with that, because of underlying data becoming significant, because you remove the noise from one good fixture or something like that. You get to know teams a little bit better. The transfer window is finished. Now, what is interesting next season is we have the World Cup. We have the World Cup in mid-November. So you might have some people holding out that wild card now, assuming there's no difference in chips or whatever. You might have people actually just holding on and saying, I'm going to take a few hits if needed, but I want to wild card when teams come back from the World Cup. I want to get in the guys who've rested, who haven't had, the Salahs and the guys who were actually Salah is not involved in the.
He's not. He's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And Haaland isn't either.
Yeah,
Haaland isn't either. So there will be players that people will just say, look, these are the guys I want, and I'm just going to kind of do what I have to do until that World Cup phase. So things may change in terms of the future dynamics, but I think the whole genesis of why you play the wild card remains. And I just want to also talk about the early wild carders. It's a very legitimate strategy to go very early, because a lot of times we're going in the dark from game week 1, and we'll talk about it as we do preseason videos. We're completely shooting in the dark, and a lot of times we're going for teams, for players we have no idea about. And this is again back to the season past, where everybody had Werner, where there was a blank game week for Man United and City, if you'll remember. People just said, look, early wildcard, I'm going to go for it. And sometimes it really works out, because you get all the price rises, you get the good players early, as opposed to other people scrambling. So I don't think there's one size fits all in any season, but I'm very interested how it works out in the next season in terms of the dynamics for the World Cup.
Yeah.
I think this season, the super early wild cards actually didn't pan out so well. From my memory of it, as in like a game week 3-4 type of wild card. And I think game week 8 was a so wild card. But we'll see how it pans out next season.
Looking at the top 10, I think all of the top 10 went in either 7 or 8 for the wild card, except for one, who was Savanish in second, who went in game week 16. So he went a lot later. So he obviously used his transfers to kind of target those Chelsea and City players rather than using the wild card. But like 9 out of 10 of the top 10 he used it 7 and 8. So it tells you.
We basically, the guy who smashed it was James, right? Everybody on the wild card had James. And when we'll come to players and we'll see the players that have given us the gains, it's James. Because it was that point when James wasn't well owned. And obviously people got to him by game week 11, 12. This is the value of the wild card. We got the gains, the 20 pointers in game week 8, 9. And the guys who got on James at game week 11 and 12 basically got the 1 pointer. So that makes a big difference in terms of, the window to wildcard. And ironically, people who wildcarded in game week 7 had double City defense. I remember they went for Diaz and Cancelo, and the people who wildcarded in game week 8 went for Rudiger or Chilwell and James. So just one of those things that happens. There's a little bit of luck in it in terms of, after the 7th game week, City conceded, and so people just said, okay, I'll go double Chelsea instead. Just one of those.
I mean, that Chelsea defence, I mean, that was a weekly changing thing between game week 7 and 10. Alonso came in, he was fighting for a place with Chilwell, and then, it was like 50-50. Then Chilwell got injured a bit later on. I think Rudiger came in and he was really strong, but then I think he got a bit of an injury. So people were like going for Azpilicueta. James had been out and was kind of come back in. It was every week, it was like there was a new Chelsea defender that was like top of the pile, and then in the end it was James that was the one to go for that period. So if you got him, you obviously did really well. But it wasn't the. I remember when I bought James in, it wasn't an easy decision to be like, I'm definitely going for James. There was 4 Chelsea defenders that I was looking at, and in the end, injuries and things sort of pushed me towards him. That's why again, game week 8 was quite successful. Yeah.
Okay, moving on from the wild card, I think bench boost deserves a little bit of discussion. Now, we played it all differently. So, Andy, you bench boosted and then wildcarded out of it. I think that was a very, very good strategy in the sense that it gave you didn't have to carry a bad bench or a big bench for the run-in. And it gave you the capacity to attack the doubles in the future. I went with the traditional wildcard in game week 26, bench boost in game week 28 with a free hit in the middle. And then as you went completely different this year with wildcard and then 10 weeks later bench boost. So who wants to go? Maybe as you go first. How did that work out in terms of, would you advise anyone to do this in the future?
I just hate this chip. I hate this chip so much. And in the end, it went okay. I got 18 points on it, and I'll take that. Looking at it purely from a point of view, but what I did was I played it terribly, really, because I tried to basically combine two different strategies. I tried to combine I hate the bench boost. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to use it in a game week, take the 8 points and not have a really strong bench. That means I've got a worse 11. But then every week I was conscious, I probably should upgrade this bench a little bit, and I just couldn't help but get into that kind of mindset of, oh God, I'm going to end up benching with Hwang and Amity and these guys. And it was like, that was the strategy. That was what I knew that was going to happen. And in the end, that's what stopped me making better moves in Gameweek 36 and going for like De Bruyne, because I was taking out players like Che Adams who weren't even in my 11, but I felt like I needed to get rid of. So yeah, I think that's why the wildcard and the bench boost being played so close to each other is so useful, because you can wildcard, but then you can start to downgrade the bench and improve your 11 rather than making your 11 worse and improving your bench a bit later on. So in the end, I feel like I got away with it a little bit with Newcastle players coming in 37, but yeah, I think it's got to be played closer to a wildcard in future. So yeah, I'll be going back to that strategy again next season.
I mean, ironically for you and me, the people who actually delivered on the bench were the single game weekers, right? Yeah, Bruno and Dubravka had a single. For me, obviously, I wildcard in 26. I hoped for Arsenal assets to get a double. They didn't, but they smashed it anyway. I mean, Saka got a 15-pointer or something, if I remember. Yeah. So I think, that's the thing. I think we fixate too much on getting players with 2 fixtures. But sometimes it's just fine to get a good bench and not fixate about it so much. I think that's one key learning. Whether the bench boost chip changes or not, we don't know. But having said that, we just basically can't be held hostage to this chip and carry the team. It's just one to get done with.
Well, the frustrating things in 36. I mean, look at Jamie. He played his chip in 36, and that really was the perfect week to play it, because you had Foster coming in with double digits. You had Nketiah, broken into the team, 5.3 million or something, getting 2 goals in that first match. There was bench boost with like 25 points, and that was after people had wildcarded, a lot of people after 2 weeks. So really, that strategy, wildcards and then bench boost and then free hit. If you had the option to do that in 35, 36, and 37. I think that was great.
It was perfect. Yeah, he played his bench boost perfectly. Yeah. That was his best game week. I think he had a game week rank of 300 or something. He scored 200 points in game week 36. He had KDB captain,
as many as me.
KDB captain and a perfect bench boost. Yeah. So that was the play. It's all hindsight, but it sounds easy now, right? Because that's the traditional way we've always done it.
Yeah.
We thought, and this is why, Andy, you're going to talk about it. We thought, let's attack the big hitters, get the bench boost out of the way so you can get a Son, De Bruyne and Salah on your game week 36. Was that the thinking, Andy?
Yeah. I thought I had a decent bench in 33, but I overvalued the idea of getting it out of the way over really assessing, kind of that you could still work your way around the season with a wildcard in 34 and a bench boost in 36, basically. And so when I think about, in hindsight, who really killed my hopes of getting in the top 10K, it's guys like Nketiah, because in my wildcard 34, yes, I could have gone for him, but I had options to just focus on the starting 11 and skip out on guys like Nketiah. And that ended up being my downfall because, his ownership was through the roof. I didn't realize how high it was. And then, he kept scoring the 35, 36 or something. So if I went back in time, I think I would have changed my strategy a little bit, but at the same time, I thought it was the right call. But those enablers are the ones that actually hurt me the most.
Oh,
I think you're muted. Yeah.
Sorry. Then quickly on the free hits, I look, there were 2 free hits this season. We don't know if we'll get 2 free hits again. I just wanted to kind of bring up a couple of points on free hit. So I had a bad free hit 27. I had an average free hit 37. And what I actually really value from those free hit chips is what I could do around those weeks. Because of 27, even though I only got a 10-point uplift from the average, in 26, I was able to gain a lot. Even though I didn't triple captain Salah, I matched the average. And game week 28 and 29 were my best 2 game weeks of the season in terms of the game week rank. So I feel I was able to do that because I was able to get these players for 27 and not worry about them in 28, 29. Same thing with 37. I was able to get the guys like Villa, like Leicester. Now, as it happens, they all smashed it in game week 38 as well. But I just felt that I had the right team for 36 and 38, and that green arrow in 38 was solidified because I didn't have to sell my Leicester players, or I wouldn't have sold Leicester, but my Villa players. And so for me, that's the learning that I take again to next season, where when we evaluate the free hit chip, we shouldn't just look at that week, but how did that affect my transfers and my strategy around that week? So that was my view of my 2 free hit chips. As you smashed your first one, which was the Chelsea cheat code. But how was your other free hit? How did that go?
Oh, I mean, talk about the story of 2 different chips. I mean, my first chip was amazing. I mean, I'd kept it, after a lot of people had used it in that blank game week and targeted City in that single game week, and I never felt like that was a great strategy, just because people were targeting players I didn't really think were that amazing. So I waited. This Chelsea game week just fell into our lap, and it was a great week because James, Rudiger, Havertz, Coutinho, all these players did so well. And what was nice about it is exactly what you just said. It meant I don't think I had I didn't have Salah or Kane at that point as well, and that was a game I was worried about because Salah had West Ham at home. And Kane had Watford, I think it was. No, Everton at home. So I didn't have to worry about those because I knew I was going to wildcard straight after it. So it basically bought me a week of not worrying. Got a big score. Everything was great. And then 34, I mean, it's easy to look back at the free hit in 34 and, it didn't work. I got 1 point more than the average, something like that. It then meant I didn't have it in 37 when it was like... That's the thing with, in 36 or 37, they couldn't really have been much better. For people, 37 free hit went well. Richarlison going big, and players like that. And in 36, obviously, you could move for De Bruyne easy, and basically everyone except for my players got points. But the logic behind it was that I liked the look of that Chelsea double again with 2 home games against West Ham and United, and I had a team of 11 doublers in place already for 36.
Yeah.
So. They weren't the right players, and I think that's one of the key learnings that I'll take from that is exactly what you just said. You talk about that with single game week players, but also just because you've got a load of double game week players, if the fixtures aren't right, they're not as effective as you kind of hope. So, I mean, that nearly cost me everything, that second free hit. I could easily have fallen out of the top 10k. I was well inside the top 1k at that point, and it nearly spiraled, but. I think I overthought it. I tried to be a bit too clever. I should have saved it for 37th or 36th. But again, it was the bench boost as well. I knew I had to use the bench boost in one of those weeks, and I almost had too many chips to know when to really use them. So I blame the bench boost entirely.
I think to be fair, 34 was the worst variance. Because the 2 players that all free hitters missed out on were Saka and Robertson, and they both scored 15 pointers. It was just one of those things.
And Sterling, no goal, not even assist in a 5-0 win at Watford. And Gabriel Jesus with 4. If Sterling gets the return that Jesus gets in that, I'm probably looking at that and thinking it's a successful chip. So variance, my favorite word.
So Andy, you played it at the same times as me. Anything to add on the free hits?
Just underwhelming. Yep, that's about it.
All right. In fact, I want to come to you now on hits. You have the most hits. So we've compared here the number of hits taken by all managers. Jamie is on 10. Now, there is a lot of people look at the winner of FPL and say, look, he took so few hits. He took so few hits because his team was doing really well. He was never behind the curve. So this, obviously, we should remember that. This does not mean that taking less hits makes you win FPL. So I think there needs to be a discussion to be had on hits and how you approach hits. But 17 seems a little bit high. So where do you think you went hit crazy, Andy? And what do you learn from this for the future?
I've actually, let's see.
He's jumped ahead, Andy, on the agenda. It's.
Yep, I see it.
It confused me as well, but I think I've got it. It's fine.
I actually don't know. I don't know why I took so many hits. I think I was trying to catch up to the template at one point. But yeah, I think I'm pretty trigger happy when it comes to taking hits. Something maybe I should be more conscious of next season. Yeah.
I can fill in maybe here.
Okay.
I love you, Andy. You're brilliant, but you have to be one of the most anxious FPL managers I have ever met in my life. And I tell you, there's got to be a FOMO with you. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest that you take loads of hits, because I imagine you get to deadline, you think, oh my god, I haven't got XX. I'm just gonna have to bring him in.
Yeah.
That's my general sense.
That's exactly it. I mean, look, this is a Twitter thing, by the way. Again, a learning for everyone. People look at people's teams being posted and go, oh my god, he has these 5 players. I have 3 of these 5 players. All of them are going to get double digits. Reality, maybe 2 of them will get double digits. Maybe you already have those 2 out of the 3. You don't have to have all 5. So trying to perfect the team, and sometimes we take hits for the 11th best player. Makes no sense, because probably you're taking a hit for somebody who will get 5 more points than the player. So, I mean, this is not going to be a counseling session on take less hits, because I take hits a lot myself. But I generally take hits because I feel if I was to wildcard, now I've talked about this in the videos before, if I compare my team to a wildcarder and I say I'm 5 players short of this guy, and I think these are the 5 to have, I don't mind taking a hit or 2 to basically catch myself to that ideal team for the next 10 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever that is. But on the flip side, was it a case of you just kind of being happy with the team? Is that your general approach? I mean, 10 hits is very impressive in a season like this.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about kind of general strategies and things. I don't think my general strategy changed too much compared to last season, where I didn't have that great a season. But one thing I definitely did change was my attitude to hits. And it was from watching and listening to kind of, streams like this, in the sense that I wanted to take less. I just did. That was something I really wanted to do. If I was ever on the fence, I think I would have had a kind of a FOMO and wanted to do it, just in case. It always annoyed me. I could have done it and I didn't. And,
Yeah.
But realistically, the hits are often quite difficult to pay off, because you not only need that player to, be the player you take out to not do anything and the player you bring in to do something, say. You've also got the fact that you use that transfer as well. So, it affects your ability going forward to make multiple moves and switch players and positions and things. And I think particularly with this season, we had, things like the forwards being so poor, but then suddenly Kane and Ronaldo would come back into it. And that meant maybe you had to take funds out of places like your defence or your midfield. Defence was really strong all season. Having that flexibility to be able to swap around your positions, particularly, I think is kind of massively undervalued. And you can, once you start taking them, people say this kind of thing about hits being Moorish. well, they are, both in terms of general attitude, I think, because I've fallen into that trap. But also, once you've taken a hit, you have to take more hit. You sometimes have to take more hits going forward, because you haven't got the luxury of those 2 transfers anyway. Absolutely. So actually, saving you a transfer 1 week saves you a transfer the second week, and then that kind of goes on and on and on. So, yeah, whenever I was 50-50, I'd side on the side of not taking the hit. And also, I prioritised, rather than taking out okay players for what I thought was good players, I prioritised taking out my really crap players for good players, and not always trying to hit those big returns. So, yeah, that was my strategy this season.
That's great advice. I mean, the one thing I always do is I kind of challenge myself on why should I not save a transfer? Yeah. Because I think going to 2 free transfers is just so powerful in the game, and especially if you're going to 2 free transfers before some kind of a checkpoint. That could be international break, that could be a double game week, it could be a blank game week. Because every week you save a transfer, for me it is more than 4 points. So today a transfer is 4 points, any transfer, even if it's free. If you save it, it's more than 4, because you have the information, you have more value. Maybe somebody gets injured, maybe somebody is kind of dropped from the team. And so using 2 is way more powerful. And then I've actually done this 3 times this season, where I had 2 and then I used 3. So it's like a mini wildcard. I know Mark loves this as well, where you kind of structurally, if you wanted to change your team, having 2, using the 3rd and taking a hit that way makes a massive difference compared to if you keep making luxury transfers every week. Your team will look better that week, but you've lost out on this big, powerful mini wildcard or a double transfer that Az also talked about. So I think that's one of the things that is always gone amiss. There's always the need to do something, that I need to do something this week because I think I don't have the third best captain, but you have the best captain, so it's fine. That's basically the thing.
Yeah, completely agree.
All right. Then the next one is team value. Team value is, again, obviously a function of taking hits, how aggressive you are in terms of early transfers. This season has taught us that early transfers don't always work, and there's value in waiting. So was there any, so maybe I'll start because my team value is the highest, and it generally tends to be, I have probably never ended a season under 106 to 107 team value, but it's not really something that I do very aggressively. It's just when it's early season, we'll come to the hits by phases. You'll see that I take more hits in the first half of the season, because the way I approach it is, if I'm in Gameweek 5, for example, I haven't wildcarded, and I see that player X is completely going crazy. Let's say if Man United have signed Ronaldo and he's playing Newcastle next. I'll go on him early because I know he's going to jump twice, and I have a parachute of a wildcard if things really go wrong, or I have a parachute of taking a hit if things are needed to be fixed. So I end up taking more hits, and that's a function of doing slightly earlier transfers. So basically being more aggressive, because I feel like at that point, we don't have much underlying data. You're seeing things and reacting to things. You're seeing transfers, you're seeing formation changes. Some managers doing well, some managers doing way worse than what we originally thought. So that's just the way I kind of play. And then in the second half, generally I take 20, 30% of the hits that I've taken in the first half. I mean, this season was slightly different because of the double game weeks. But in the second half, I'm more confident that if I'm holding a Bowen, then that is backed by 18 game weeks of underlying data. Just because he had 1 or 2 blanks, I'm not going to sell him. So that's why I generally take less hits. But as the one with the lowest, what is that something different? How do you approach team value?
Yeah, I think I do care about team value, definitely. I think I do make early transfers, sometimes maybe a bit too early, just to try and catch that 0.1, 0.2, particularly early in the season when you're trying to build it up. But then in the second half, I care a lot less about it. I mean, it didn't go well for me, but for example, selling Cancelo on my second wildcard, I had a lot of value tied up in him, but I thought there was better options elsewhere. I was wrong, and I ended up bringing him back. But right. I was less concerned about dropping that value when there's 8, 9 weeks left. But it's important. I mean, it allows you to, in theory, build better free hit teams. It allows you to, target the best players during the run-in. It's interesting because like Fabio, for example, Fabio Bor is the best FPL manager of all time, indisputable now, given that he's now finished 200th in the world again. He did an article for Scout. He doesn't care about team value at all. Doesn't check price value websites. He's very much of the opinion if he can't have the player that he wants, he'll find an alternative and get them in. So I mean that's interesting because that isn't how Mark's the complete opposite. For example, Mark, excellent FPL manager, he puts so much stock in building up this team value and doing early transfer, particularly in the season. So I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I think the information is more important than the value. But I think sometimes player prices can just run away from you a bit. I mean, I look at Lundstrom last season, and he never felt the priority for me to bring in. And by the time I did bring him in, he was 5 million, and I'd lost $1 million on that. So sometimes I think you do have to take notice.
I think the mental aspect to it is as well, like you said, sometimes the player rises by 0.3, 0.4, and you feel like you've missed the boat. Absolutely. And now you don't want to join this boat because you will beat this by something else. And this is actually exactly why I changed the approach, where I felt like if this is a bandwagon, which I think can have some legs, just go early, because even if you sell later, it's almost like you're with the masses. So you're kind of, even if he blanks for the next 3 weeks, you haven't actually lost much. Whereas if you don't and you miss out, then I don't know if this is the most effective way to play, but I just feel that in terms of transfers, if you see something early season, especially, I think it's worth going for. So chasing that a little bit. But Andy, do you do things differently?
I think next season, I'm going to focus a lot more on team value. I know some people, I think it's very mixed bag of opinions of how people see team value as. For me personally, I do think it's quite important at times, especially when you want to play your best free hit or, have a late wild card, I think that, 0.5, that 1 million makes a big difference. So next season, early game, I'm definitely going to be, looking at, FPL statistics and looking at team, price rises and moving on players early and trying to get on Livermento before a 0.1 rise, 0.2 rise, and, trying to get on guys like Lundstrom. And regardless of what I think of the player, as you mentioned, just get on the mass players first half of the season, not worry so much about it being so different and unique and trying to go for differential players, especially the first, like I would say 8 or 9 or 10 game weeks. So I think I missed a lot of team value during that time, which hurt me with my later chips.
Yeah. I mean, the devil's advocate would say 1 million less, you just go Matip instead of Robertson, and he gets more points anyway. But it's easier said than done. It's easy. It's very hard to pick that gem who, even though he has a lower price, will do better than the corresponding premium. So, I mean, the pricing is done in a way where the higher price player has to score more points. So there is a points value to a higher team value as well. Whether that pans out or not is another question.
I think, so I think of Cam as a prime example of someone who really cares, overly cares about team value, and, good on him. Right. And so his team value was insane. And I looked at his wildcard team and free hit team in 34, 36, and it was just a ridiculous team, right? You had like 4 or 5 premiums versus everyone having 3 or 4 premiums, and then Salah got injured, right? And so none of that mattered, right? Mm-hmm. So you just put yourself in a position to get luckier because you have more, I guess, money inside your team, but it doesn't mean it's going to always work out, which is why it's easy to say team value is overrated. But at the same time, I'd rather have KDB plus Kane than Kane plus, like a Foden, right?
Yep. Well, I mean, a good example is Reece James. I mean, in game week 9, Reece James was 5.5. By game week 12, he was 6.
Yeah.
So, you're talking like 3 or 4 weeks, and then suddenly a player can rise 0.5. That's one player out of 15 in your squad. So I think sometimes you do have to act quickly. A player going up 0.2, I mean, a player going up 0.2, 0.3 in a week is a lot. If you spread that over your whole team, it's you're looking at a lot of money. So I think you've got to have some kind of handle on it. I don't think you can just ignore it completely. I mean, Fabio does, but he's a robot of some description. He's not a real person. I think for the majority of us, I think there needs to be some handle on it.
Yeah, I mean, for those listening, viewing who don't really chase team value, it's a dangerous game. So don't get us wrong. I think the most famous example from this season was when people went early on Chilwell, and then he had the very long-term injury. I think it was game week 9 or 10. Where he completely smashed it 2 weeks in a row, early transfer, and the classic issue of him getting injured, Champions League. So we have to be careful the weeks we do it. It's a risk reward thing, like most things in FPL. So you have to choose the weeks where you do it. And done over seasons to kind of experience it, and then you just know when to go early when and you know when to take the risk.
You've frozen, Pras, your webcam, but we can still hear you.
Right. Sorry.
Pras, yeah, you're frozen.
It just worries me that there's a proper dropout coming. You're frozen in a very, like, kind of, that would be a good, like, thing for burning questions. Just like, very serious and very kind of passionate.
Huh. Shall we continue, or?
You still there, Pras?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yep.
We can just carry on if you want.
Okay. Well, I'll try to figure this out in the background. But why don't you? The last topic within this slide was your what was it? The immediate games, right?
Double digits.
Had the lowest double-digit hauls, which is very surprising to me because we all remember the Bruno Guimaraes, the Martinellis. Oh, yeah. How did you think about? I mean, what do you think about that? Way lower than anyone else.
Yeah, I know. I was surprised by that. I mean, I've got 85, Pras and Sonaldo with 91, and Jamie with 98. Like that is a considerable like difference. I think, if you're comparing a kind of a 6 or 7 to an 11 over that many different games, you're talking 13. That's like what, 60, 65 points compared to Jamie, for example. So yeah, I mean, it's not really. Wouldn't have thought looking at my season I would have had, that low. So I don't really know kind of how to comment on it, and I guess it's not really something you can predict either. So it's tricky to know what to do with that information. But at the same time, yeah, I'm a bit surprised.
Interesting, when we'll come to it, you have the most immediate gains from transfers as well. So ironically, even though you haven't got the double-digit hauls, when you made the transfer, you made the right transfer. So as you say, there's nothing you can do really.
I think that definitely comes from the strategy of taking out bad players for good players, rather than trying to take out good players for excellent players, for example.
Correct.
Because often those good players outscore the excellent players. But at least when you take out Neil Maupay, with a pretty strong degree of certainty the player you bring in is going to outscore him, and often it happens in the week that you do it. So yeah, I think that is good, because that does reaffirm to me that I was taking, not necessarily always bringing in the right players, but definitely taking out the right players, which I think is I've tried quite hard to do this season.
Okay, excellent. While you go to the next slide, maybe I'll just drop and try to come back in. That's on the bench. So maybe, Andy, if you want to kick off the discussion on the bench. I'm really impressed with Jamie's bench stats, by the way. I don't know what you can do about it, but let's have a discussion on that. I'll just come back.
So we're going to skip the captaincy points and go to bench first.
Oh, Pras is all over the show. He's jumping from hits to the thingy. Yeah, we'll start with the bench and we'll come into captaincy after.
Okay, so what we have here is sort of the bench overview of the season. Yep, nice. So here we go. As you have 237 bench points. Wow, that's the most out of us four. Pras, 214. I'm at 216. And surprisingly, Jamie has the least amount of bench points, 211, which makes sense. Unsurprisingly, I guess. And so, yeah, I guess... that kind of sucks, but at the same time, you've had a great season. Have you noticed that you've had a lot of bench points throughout the season?
I know for a fact one player that would have contributed massively to this, and that was Smith Rowe. I had a great season with Smith Rowe, but I caught a lot of his points, but he was never supposed to be a starting player for me. He was always supposed to be a bench option, I'd call him. He was like 5.5 million or something. So yeah, I'm not surprised when I had 50-50 decision to make. Maybe he had a game against Leicester or something, and other players had decent games, and he was the first one that I'd look to bench. So he's probably to do that. I can't remember too many weeks though in which I had really big benches. I mean, just looking through my season history, in Gameweek 33, I had that was when Roberts got a goal. Who was that against? That was against Southampton. I mean, you can't predict a 4.4 million defender getting a goal in that. I mean, I had a run from game week 9 to 11 of quite a few points. In game week 11, I had Foster on the bench. He was playing Man United. No, he wasn't. He was playing Watford. He was playing Watford away, and I played Ramsdale. So I'm not going to play Foster over Ramsdale in that fixture, so I'm not too annoyed about that. Game week 10, I had Ramsdale on the bench. I played Foster. That's when Ramsdale had an away game at Leicester, and Watford had a home game against Southampton. So it was often Foster coming in and getting points, which was why my total was so high. For me, though, bench points they're irritating, right? You can't help but be annoyed when, when you've got a player on your bench who scores big. But looking at it kind of logically, that player could continue to rise in price. They might be a player that people are then looking to transfer in, and you've already got them in place. And there's nothing you can really do about it. If you've made the right call and the outcome hasn't worked out, there's nothing that you can do to affect that. So I don't mind them. I mean, having Smith Rowe, for example, on my bench getting points, it made it easy for me because I didn't have to make the decision of whether to buy him or not, that a lot of people did. I had him already and I started him and he continued to do well. So I wouldn't, as I said, I'm not too worried about bench points, to be honest.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep. And we can see.
Okay. Thank you. So in fact, the nuanced question on the bench is, we're going to move to a state where we'll have 5 subs, not in FPL, but in real football. So how does that affect the kind of players you pick, how you use your bench? So I see Andy here, for example, he's only got 13 auto subs, same as Jamie. And you and I, as we're on 16 and 17. So that's 4 more game weeks we've actually had to dip into our bench. Have we gone for riskier players? Is it just a case of, happenstance? How will that change when we think about, are we going to go for more nailed players, maybe more center backs as opposed to wing backs? Just, thoughts around that for the future, for example. Andy, you're smiling.
We're all over the place in terms of video, and Az is fixing it up.
We're sorted now. We're sorted now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Zoom doesn't make it easy because you drag someone to where you want them to be, and then it doesn't do what you want. It changes everyone's thing. It's sorted now. Don't worry.
So Andy, you had only 13 times that you dipped into the bench out of 38 game weeks, which is actually pretty good. So what did you do anything differently? Were you kind of averse to players that were more risky for X minutes?
Yeah, I think if you look at, after we started podding Pras, generally I tend to have try to have a weaker bench, at least the 14th and 15th man. So maybe that's the reason why this is happening. Again, there's times throughout the season, especially when we needed a bench. So we had a solid bench, but I don't think there's no particular reason why this is happening. It could just be a lucky thing. It could just be, just the fact that,
did you go for fewer City players, for example? Did you have Foden for a lot of the season? Because the more City players you have, the more you dip into the bench. Because actually, we got lucky this year where a lot of times City players didn't cameo. When they missed out, they actually just completely missed out. So could that be one of the things? Did you just kind of avoid City a lot more?
I think I had Foden for a while, but he was starting, and when I did have him, I went for I didn't have Bernardo Silva, and I had Gundogan for a hot second there, which is probably why I have 1 or 2 extra hits, as well as less points. But I also don't think Gundogan got rotated while I had him as well. So I don't think City was a big issue because I just had Cancelo only. But that's probably why I didn't have much rotation with the City boys. Yeah.
Right. Okay, then. In terms of, we've also got a stat here in terms of immediate transfer gains. Now, if you had to basically put a number on Az's success this season, it has to be this one. Almost 500 points gained from immediate transfers, which basically means you take out a bad player, you get a good player, you get the delta, and wow. I mean, even Jamie has 440 immediate transfer gains, 500 points. Is it Bruno? Is it Martinelli? Who else comes to memory as your favorite 1 week picks?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a three names really. It's Reece James early on, and particularly in kind of the free hit when I captained him. The Bruno G captaincy as well is big as well, and then and then the Martinelli one as well was. So I mean this is a combination of trusting what I see on the pitch and looking at the stats. I mean, Bruno G was a pure kind of, grass FC as we like to call it, pick. I liked what I'd seen in games, 2 home games, not a huge amount of stats to back it up. Martinelli was the complete opposite. Martinelli was someone who I was really impressed with in the stats and looked like he'd had a spot in the team. So I always think you've got to back yourself. I mean, we talk about, analytics FC. I don't have a problem with people looking at models and looking at spreadsheets and graphs. I mean, Fantasy Football Scout has tables and stats, and I spent ages looking at them. But at the end of it all, you can't just use an algorithm to predict all of your things. You still need to watch games. I think watching highlights, watching full games, to me is still the best cover analysis that you can have. So I can see when I've got a player who isn't getting into the right positions, isn't looking like he's taking shots, isn't involved in the general attacking play, and when a player is. And when I see that, and the transfers allow me to make moves, and these are cheap players, right? Reece James 5.5, Martinelli 5.5, Bruno G 5 million. They're easy switches to get to. It's not like I've got to rip my team apart to get Ronaldo, and you kind of forget how useful these kind of really budget enablers are, and sometimes you don't want to use a transfer on them because you're trying to look elsewhere. But your Livramentos, your Lundstroms of last seasons, these are really important players for your squad. And once they hit form and you get them in early, it can mean a lot to your team. So that was basically my strategy. Trust your gut and then take out the rubbish players.
I'm thinking Maddison as well, right? He was your immediate transfer gain.
Yes.
25 points in game week 37.
That was lovely, my boy.
I mean, these are all. What's fascinating is, you could get an immediate transfer gain going let's say a bad player for a very high owned player. Let's say if you went for Mane, and then Mane is not a bad player, but not as did as well as Salah. So if you went Mane to Salah, you would have also got an immediate transfer gain, let's say early season. But your picks were actually low owned, differential, and they actually smashed it. So look, I mean, that's a big takeaway, and it's a takeaway for me because I have the lowest immediate transfer gain, and I'm not actually surprised by that. I'm not surprised because my strategy whenever I transfer somebody in is I look at the next 10 game weeks or the 5 game weeks, and I'm quite pleased with the result to see that difference. And there's no right way actually, because we're very close in ultimate points. I think we're 6 points apart. But to have almost 150 point gap,
crazy, isn't it?
In terms of who you go for, because I kind of have been bitten too much by transferring in Kane before Cardiff, or getting a Ronaldo before a Norwich. Now, sometimes getting a Ronaldo for Norwich, he gets you a hat trick, but sometimes getting a Bruno against Norwich basically means you didn't get the Salah points. So I'm very conservative to make these 1 week, 2 week moves where somebody's playing Norwich and Newcastle of old, and just going for it. Unless because if I don't think that player fits in my wildcard team 5 weeks down the line, I just avoid it, which is why my transfers usually mean that this guy needs to have good fixtures in week 5 and week 6. I know this sounds really sad, but it's just the way I play in terms of fixtures. And I generally go for players like that. And this is why my immediate transfers the next game week isn't probably as high. And obviously there's a flip side to it, right? If I'm 150 points behind you in the next game week, basically it means maybe I'm 140 ahead in terms of getting the player, but getting the gains after the first week. Basically, that was the way I was thinking about it.
I think the main thing is you don't target really immediate transfer gains. They're nice. It's always nice when you take out a player and a player comes in and thingy. But you've got to look ahead over the next couple. I mean, my biggest thing this season is don't transfer in bad players. And that sounds really stupid and obvious because obviously you don't want to transfer in good players. But sometimes it's tempting when you've got a 6 million spot to fill, and I'm going to use them again, and Neil Maupay's playing Norwich at home. It's very tempting to try and make that move and try and hit that one thing. And then that week goes and he's got 3 points and you're stuck with him. Happens all the time. Che Adams for me. I mean, I had Che Adams for about 10 weeks. I just couldn't get rid of him, and he wasn't even playing. He wasn't scoring. Nightmare. So those were the kind of transfers where I did actually target immediate points. Double game weeks as well. I think a lot of people transfer players in just for that double game week.
Absolutely.
It worked for me with Bruno. It didn't work for me with Che Adams. Perfect example.
Yeah, or Weghorst, or Dennis, or King.
Exactly.
All right. Last one on this is avoiding teams. So, by the way, I haven't said this actually, but this is all from this website called anewplayer.net. You'll see it on Twitter. It's anewplaya.net, and it does a really fascinating overview of your teams. And I thought we should do this in comparison to others also to give some context. So, last one is teams. As you never had a player from Crystal Palace all season. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I mean, I do hate Palace. Don't get me wrong. As a Brighton fan, it wasn't really a conscious effort not to. I think I never wanted to get involved in Guaita because he seemed to constantly have little injuries and things. The defence was solid, but they conceded sloppy goals, and none of them really had any attacking threat. I missed the boat on Gallagher. I went Smith Rowe instead. I never had Zaha. I find him too frustrating as an option, even though he's done well for a lot of people. And then the forwards were rotating every week, so they were a team in which they've had an amazing season. I'm really impressed with the work Vieira's done there. But for me, there was too many better options in other teams.
Yeah, nice. I never had a Newcastle player in my team, which is ironic given how well they did in the second half of the season. Again, it was just one of those things where I didn't have Dubravka, who was a popular keeper, as the second keeper. Again, high team value, right? I had Sa and Ramsdale as my 2 keepers because they had good doubles over 26, 28. And then kind of never got on to Wilson or Bruno, just never did. So it's one I definitely won't do next season. I mean, Newcastle are a team, and maybe even Palace, actually. There are teams to target as good potential. We come to that in the final section on teams where we will be able to get value, maybe, hopefully, depending
Pras, on... you're speaking so highly on Newcastle the second half of the season. and you never ended up getting any of them.
I know.
Yeah.
But it was always the defense, right? It was always the Newcastle defense where I thought there was most value, because with St. Maximin's injuries, with Wood being in and out, and then Wilson I really liked. I mean, we shouted out Wilson over Tony. I was really proud of that in the Game Week 38 preview. And he did really well in Game Week 38. I wish I could go there, but I had obviously my key City striker in Jesus for Game Week 38.
One thing. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it was only Dubravka and Bruno, I think, that were options even the second half, because, like you said, St. Maximin was a striker. I think that was Wood is terrible. Fraser got injured. You weren't going to go near anyone else, and then the defense didn't. I mean, Cher maybe a few people had, but you never really got much from him. So for me, it was Dubravka or Bruno or no one, and I can see why people would avoid them.
Yeah. And you, Andy, never had any Norwich players other than their sub goalkeeper from Norwich. I think that's a wise thing. So no regrets there, right?
Yeah, I don't think I'll. So I guess as long as I play FPL, I'll probably never have a Norwich player again, right? So.
Well, hopefully they come up for their fans.
They come up. Sorry, Norwich fans. Hopefully they come up. Hopefully, I love Timo Pukki. I remember I was speaking highly on Pukki at one point.
You know how high he is in forwards? Is he the 5th highest, 10th highest? What do you think as the point scorer in forwards?
Good question.
He's third, isn't he? Behind Ronaldo.
He's third.
Yes, he is. He's the 3rd highest forward.
Yeah. He had a decent. He got about 12 goals, didn't he? 11, 12 goals, something like that.
He did.
No, I would just watch him play football, and you can tell he's just so good, right? Just like such a fluid, sometimes I imagine, like, I have this weird imagination where, because I've played football, I'll think of them playing in like the Sunday league that I'll play in, and
he's better than that though.
I know, but like there's always this dude in the Sunday league that's either a center back or forward, and just like basically wrecks everybody, and you can tell they're really good, but they're not like flashy or anything like that. And he reminds me of one of those, like, just super fluid, not flashy type of striker you would love to play with. I've always been a fan of Timo Pukki, but I guess we'll have to wait to see him. And he's pretty old too now, right? I think he's 32, 33. So yeah.
All right, excellent. Now, this obviously means that we all had the pleasure of owning assets from Watford and Burnley, and maybe that's a learning for the future, where, one of those things where double game weeks don't mean points, and backing players from bad teams isn't. And I think that's a common learning. A lot of good managers have come away this season saying we're off the shackles of double game weeks, where we used to think, we have to go there. It's FPL is for fun. It's a double game week. We'll get to root for our team twice, for our player twice. But I think the one learning I saved my free transfer Game Week 33. I didn't go for any doublers there. Obviously, having learned from mistakes being made in the Watford and the Burnley doubles, it's just one of those things. They actively this season we fell for the traps. We kept falling for the trap, and maybe next season, if there's a normal game week with just one team doubling and they're not good teams, maybe we won't fall for the trap next season, right? Right?
You say that. We're all suckers. It comes down to what you said. It's fun, right? It is fun to have a player in 2 games. They blank in the first game. You've always got that hope in the second game that they can do something. Also, you look at a lot of stats, look at minutes per XG and XGI. I mean, you can half a player's, stats and see if they outscore players like Salah, for example. What I mean by that is if a player, gets a XGI every 140 minutes or something, and Salah's is 90. In theory, that player has got an XGI of 70 because you can half it. Right. So, there are definitely big gains that you can make in a double. I mean, look at Richarlison, for example. Particularly when a player scores in both games, maybe gets 3 bonus points in each. The points can really start racking up quickly. But yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of it. I think I'll carry on always captaining a player in a double game week, but I do think maybe transferring in players who've got maybe a poor run afterwards, or are just quite. I mean, Josh King, Jesus, you look back at that and you think, oh my goodness,
I had him forever. Yeah.
But he was frustrated because he was on penalties. His attacking stats were decent. When before Hodgson came in, Watford's attack was looked fairly decent, and then he had the doubles. It all looked on paper to be all right for him. But
this is my Josh King story. I picked Josh King over Dennis. And Dennis absolutely went fire for a little bit. And then everyone started, speaking highly of Dennis, so I got both of them in. And then, obviously the downfall of FPL Sonaldo. So,
I mean, one word of caution for people who use stats here for King. We all basically were on this going gaga that King has better stats than Dennis, right? And it became into this whole thing of Grass FC, Analytical FC, or whatever.
It all started, yep.
Yeah, and the problem with King's stats were they were all beefed up by this one game where he scored a hat-trick against Man United. And nobody normalized it. I don't think anybody does that. And we just said last 6 game weeks, look at this. King is so much better. If you removed that one game, King was completely rubbish, as was Dennis, but both were rubbish. So then you could have broken the tie and said, okay, Dennis at least is more central. He's looking better, eye test. And it's a little bit hindsighty, but I think that was one case where we unnecessarily focused too much on slightly better stats. I mean, it was irrelevant. It was more a case of both are bad, which one looks less bad. And maybe Dennis was better.
I think doubling up with an attack, and even the triple up, but especially the triple up, if you double up on an attack, they've got to be a good team. That's one thing that I just won't do. I mean, and they maybe we might see in the future a team like Watford has a really good run of fixtures and you've got 2 really good players in the side. But yeah, I think to double up. I mean, it was this season with forwards being as rubbish as they are. I'm not surprised to see people going with Dennis and King because they were both kind of enablers in their own way. You paired that with a Ronaldo or a Kane or whatever, and you could look to bench one. But if we start seeing with Haaland coming in, maybe Mitrovic next season, I do wonder if we're gonna not want to use those spots for players like that.
I agree.
Going forward.
I agree. All right, let's go to the next section. So this was a long one. We spent an hour on this one, but look, I think hopefully we've sort of talked about the season as well as the learnings. But the second topic is I wanted to break down the season into 4 parts. So the first part being the early phase, where we've sort of spent time on this, where how do we approach the early phase, which includes your first wildcard. It basically takes you right up till the crunch Christmas period. So first phase, pre-Christmas, early season. Second phase is usually the Christmas period. In this case, it turned out to be the COVID postponement phase, where 2 hours before kickoffs or deadlines, we were hearing about fixture postponements. How did we tackle that phase? Phase 3, I've put it as game week 26 and 30. This is the phase where a lot of fixtures being rescheduled, but then also blanks were basically being presented because FA Cup quarterfinals were going on and the the League Cup final was going on, so it was creating blanks. And then this last stretch of game week 31 to 38. And it's interesting to see how many hits we took and how our ranks were at the end of each of these phases. So I think let's talk about the phase 1. We're not going to discuss hits here, but just one point to note here is this is what I was trying to say. As you took 1 hit in phase 1, which is game week 1 to 12, I took 4. It's a slight difference in the way we kind of approach it. Even though I had wildcarded, I wasn't afraid to take hits to kind of improve my team value. And you were obviously, because of your wildcard and you had this more disciplined approach, you had the 1 hit. Andy, you were somewhere in the middle with 3. And interestingly, like you, as Jamie only took 1 hit in this first phase. At the end of this first phase, very interestingly, as you were ranked higher than Jamie at 12.4K, Jamie was 14K, I was 36K, and Andy, you actually had a slightly worse start, which was at 59K. So first with you, how was your first phase? I mean, you've completely smashed it, 12K at the end of game week 12.
Well, it's just so different to any other season that I've had. I mean, normally I start so poorly and then end up having to spend the rest of the season trying to reclaim what's been going on. That is literally every season I've ever had. So to be 12K after 12 game weeks was I was really confident in kind of where I could go from there. I mean, I think it just helped look and think about the hits as well. I mean, the early season template was so strong and performed so well.
Yeah.
So I think that made it easier to not take hits and roll transfers, because I think very different to last year when a lot of like the top managers were struggling. I was, but I would say by game week 12 last season, I was probably around about 800k, 900k, something like that. And I wasn't the only one. There was plenty of others in that thing. Whereas I think looking around, I think a lot of the people that I look at were around the 100k below, something like that. Not to say if you're right down 800k, you can't have a really strong finish, but definitely, I think people got off to better seasons last year, generally speaking.
Absolutely.
But yeah, to be 12k, yeah, it was a great start. And in fact, looking at this whole chart makes me think I could have bloody won the thing.
Let's stay with phase one for now. Andy, you had, and by the way, I want to reiterate this point. People listening who haven't played the game for a long time, Twitter is often wrong with the Game Week 1 template. Yeah, it was an anomaly, I think, that everybody kind of smashed it. There will be a template, most like most wildcard templates, free hit templates. There will be a Twitter template or a FF Scout template that will start to emerge based on groupthink. But it's not always correct. People ended up having Havertz and Werner on their wildcard. On their Game Week 1 team, and then they wildcarded early, had Foden and Podence in their teams by Game Week 4. It completely was a disaster, and that happens more often, I remember, than actually completely smashing it from the first week, because we don't know. Everyone's trying to kind of fit in certain amount of players. It'll come down to prices. People will have their theories on these are the best budget defenders, and you go with it, and then new information comes in, and it's not always what you thought. So this was definitely a year where most engaged Twitter managers or people on FF Scout forums did very, very well at the beginning. So my question to you, Andy, was you are not in this pack of the top 30-ish K. Were you less engaged? Did you just choose to go differently? What was different in your approach?
I can't remember, but I think I went off to a bad start as I was missing, just off the top of my head, a guy like Tsimikas, because
you went Jota. Yeah,
I think so. I think that hurt me a lot from what I remember. So my template wasn't great from the start, and then I was chasing, still a decent start, but definitely not the start that, for example, Az had and Jamie had. So yeah, that's my brief memory of what happened. That there was a template, but I went a little different, and then it didn't pan out. Yeah.
Okay, so then the second phase is the Game Week 13 to Game Week 25 phase. It started out with that cold, snowy day in Burnley, where Spurs game got postponed, and then all these COVID postponements. Man, I mean, firstly, this is not going to happen again, right? I mean, this was something unique, and we hope for the health of the population as well as FPL that this doesn't happen again ever. But man, it was a time where all the rules were out of the window. We were all unnecessarily kind of being fixated on our phones 2 hours before the deadline. This was also the time where the servers crashed because everybody was waiting last 5 minutes to make their transfers. I mean, Andy, first you, what do you remember from this? Any pitfalls, any good memories?
No, I don't think it was that bad for me. I just remember not, maybe I didn't work out, but I wasn't complaining too much about it. I just kind of like, this is what's happening. This is just part of the game. And how do I adjust in these, situations and these postponements? That was kind of the mentality I had from what I remember. So because it's like, what can you do? It's just, this is the reality of the FPL season right now. So that's kind of what I was thinking at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that also happened in this phase is some of the, I hate to use the word casual, but less engaged managers kind of either gave up or weren't part of the big top 50K, 30K anymore, because these are the guys who made the early transfers, who weren't basically sitting in front of their phones or laptops 2 hours before the deadline. And this is also the reason why it became very hard for people to catch up later, because you almost filtered out engaged, good, very, very serious managers to the ones that are playing this for fun. So you ended up with this top 50K of really, really, or maybe 100K. And then people like Mark, who maybe didn't have a good time in this phase, just could never catch up. But as on the other hand, you continued your quest towards winning FPL by getting from 12.4K to 3.8K. And you didn't play any chips, right, in that phase as well?
No, but again, I mean, similar to Andy, I can't remember any weeks bashing my head against the desk thinking, oh no, half my team's missing. And that's just luck. Like there is a hell of a lot of luck in that. I mean, I was leaving transfers late, waiting for as much team news as I could. Obviously, I know some people making kind of early-ish transfers and then getting burned. Bringing in Watkins was a perfect example of that, and then the game gets called out last minute. I didn't have anything like that. I was able to I've just been looking back through that period, and I didn't have many auto subs coming in. I was able to get 11s out, most weeks. And that's the kind of difference, because many people weren't in that situation. And luxury, we've already got people in the chat saying this season is an asterisk season and that kind of thing. And in some ways, I agree, because it was a really difficult time to play this game, because when you play FPL, you want that ability to plan and make transfers and use your kind of head. And when things are just taken out of the rug, swept from under you after 2 hours before a deadline, or even like 10 minutes before a deadline, it's impossible to adapt to that kind of stuff. So a lot of good fortune in that phase for me, definitely.
Right. Agree with you. I think a lot of people, don't be too hard on yourselves if when you look at your own table, you've basically doubled your rank or gone differently. And there were some people actually who ended up having to use their free hit chip because they'd gone early. And this is why FPL introduced the second free hit chip, because people just couldn't cope with how their team looked, and they made a -16 and then ended up using a free hit when there was another postmodern on top of that. So this is the phase I would say people don't be too hard on yourselves, because not only did you lose out, if you ended up using a free hit chip, it affected how you did in the third and fourth phases. So it was interesting to see how this moved. And for all four of us, Jamie went from 14.7k to 118th in the world in this phase. And look, a lot of it is not genius management. It's luck, as you said. So we shouldn't be afraid to say that in terms of how it kind of fell for us.
Yep, I agree.
Third phase, also within the second phase, a lot of us continued to take hits. So I took 5 hits, Andy, you took 6, Jamie took 4, as was still the most disciplined amongst us. You took 3. So that basically says up until the end of game week 25, I had taken 9 hits, which is basically almost 75% of the hits I took all season, as you had taken 4, which is less than half of what you take. So a lot of your hits came later. And then Jamie was an even split, and even Andy, yours was almost an even split. So just in terms of how we played it, there was a difference in style of management. Phase 3 is a shorter window, but I think a very swingy window in terms of how it went, because people remember from game week 26, that was the Salah triple captaincy week where the big double happened. Game week 27 was the big blank for Liverpool and City. No, not City, Liverpool and Arsenal. And then you had the 2 big doubles coming up in 28, 29, and then the blank in 30. What a turbulent time. And a lot of people wildcarded, like myself, even at the expense of triple captaining, the best triple captain that the game has presented in the last 15 years. And for me, that was a season-defining phase. I went from 24k to 4k. And actually, this is at the end of 30. In game week 29, I had reached 2k. So that nitro boost that I got from playing the chips, from playing my wildcard and the bench boost and the free hit, I think for me made my season, at least why I contribute a lot of my reasons of ending up in the top 10k for this phase, where I just thought, and for some people it didn't work out. The wildcard didn't work out. Mark is a perfect example where that wildcard didn't work for various reasons. But for me, I think that was a phase where it really helped me. What do you guys remember from that phase? As you did really well as well. I think you wildcarded then and also played a very successful free hit, right?
Yeah, I mean, this was the best period of the season for me. I mean, looking at that, Jamie ended this at rank 382. I was ranked 555. So it shows how badly my phase 4 went, which we'll talk about in a sec. Yeah. But yeah, phase 3 was great because I stuck with that strategy of the Salah triple captain, and he goes absolutely crazy. I ignored the free hit kind of the week after and just got a kind of a rough team out, and it was a really low scoring week. And then obviously free hitted then into a big week with Chelsea. So it couldn't have been any better how those kind of weeks turned out for me. And I think the people who wildcarded that week, there was more variance. There was more. It depends depending on what players you got and all that kind of thing. But it was, if you did the Salah triple captain plan, and then you didn't free hit, you probably had a good 3 weeks during that period, and at least came out from that with a green arrow. So to be nestled in the top sort of 600, going into game week 31, I was at least confident I was going to get my best ever finish, but sadly wasn't to be.
Andy, I remember game week 26. We had a panic WhatsApp call where we went through your expected points. You were debating whether to wildcard or not. And how do you think about your time during that period? I mean, you only played the free hit during that period, nothing else, right?
Yeah, I think I think a few things. In hindsight, I regret not playing my wildcard here because I think my team was borderline wildcard team. Probably not a wildcard team, but I think I should have wildcarded. Oh, nice. But Pras, I think this was the period where you obviously, as you mentioned, excelled, right? From 26 to 30. And looking at how I finished in game week 30, it was survival mode for me. And I did a good job surviving that period. However, if you look at your phase 2 and my phase 2, and then our ranks in phase 3, you can see the significant jump, right? And I think the phase 4 just didn't pan out the way I expected to. And what I mean by this is in phase 4, I held all my chips, free hit, wildcard, and bench boost. And essentially none of them actually really worked out very well. Maybe the wildcard in bits and pieces. Look, I'm not complaining, but I don't think that I gained as much as the wildcarders in 26, for example. So, yeah.
Okay. Interestingly, Jamie played no chips in this phase, other than the triple captaincy in game week 26. Obviously, that was a no-brainer. He had no chips, and yet, he almost tripled his rank, but from 118, he was still basically under 500 in the world. So this is when you see that Jamie was kind of collecting his chips, his 2 free hits, his bench boost, his wildcard to attack phase 4. So let's go to phase 4 then. And I'll start with actually Jamie himself on what he did. So he went free hit 33, which was not too great. It was, I think for most people, free hit 33 was an iffy one where you get some Newcastle and Man United players. But then Salah did really well. So it was an okay one. But then he wildcarded in game week 34, bench boosted in 36, and free hitted in 37. Basically, the best window for bench boost, the best window for free hit, and possibly the best window for game week 34. And I'll tell you what else he did on the wildcard in 34. He sold Trent and Salah, almost as if he went back in time and he knew that Liverpool are going to have problems and they're going to start rotating. You ask me in game week 34 who are the 2 best players in the game, I would say Salah and Trent, right? But it's fascinating that he chose to go against them at a rank of 500. Would you do it? I mean, as you were high up at that point, would you think of selling them on your wildcard?
Yeah, I mean, I did, because obviously it was a Son thing, wasn't it? And Son was just getting points every week, and Salah wasn't. And Salah obviously had an incredible season, but if you look at his returns from the period of 28 to 38, I mean, he had 1 double-digit return. Liverpool were involved in all these different competitions. I watched plenty of games where he didn't look quite on it. And obviously Diaz then came in as well and took a bit of that burden off him having to kind of create and score all the goals. So I did debate it, definitely. And I'd actually sold him when I had my best finish a few years ago. I sold him in that period. So it definitely can be done. And if you want to kind of get right to the top of the game, a decision like that, going against what everyone else is doing, can be the key difference. Or Salah goes on a run and gets a hat-trick 3 matches in a row, and then you finish about 10,000.
Correct. That's the risk, and that's the risk-reward play. I mean, what I found interesting was he sold in 34. That was right after Salah had, I think, scored a 15-pointer against Man United. So there was a lot of, selling in 36, 37 when Salah has injury issues and Son is completely smashing. So he got all the Son points and he ignored all the Salah blank. So that was really good. And selling Trent as well. I think there was nothing within Trent. He'd had his rest as well, if I remember, against Watford, I think, which was in game week 31 or 32. But Andy, I never
would have considered that. Trent, exactly. Trent, I would never have got rid of. Salah, I can see the appeal, but never with Trent. So yeah, fair play to Jamie for that, because I wouldn't have had the minerals.
Trent got like 17 points in the last 8 game weeks.
Terrible.
Amazing.
Yeah, terrible.
And Robertson completely outscored him. And there's no data that supports this. It's just one of those things. I mean, Robertson has very good data, but it's not like Trent's data completely went to zero. He still did very well.
And he didn't have the competition. I mean, Gomez wasn't the competition. Obviously, Robertson had Simicast. So I never considered that self, not for a second.
Okay. And then, Andy, you talked about your phase 4 already. I don't think you need to be disappointed in the way you played as such. I think it's just the way it worked out, right? Bench boost wasn't the best in 33 versus 36. The wild card was fine. I think you made your best game week, by the way. Do you know what is your best game week in terms of your game week rank all season?
I think 35, right?
35. Yeah. So there is some value in your wild card where because you were able to kind of skim the bench, using a bench boost, you did get value, even though it was Brownhill who came in with your 10-pointer. You still were able to make gains from the wild card. So you shouldn't think that it was just one of those things that didn't work out. Yeah. And the fact that bench boost went crazy in game week 36. But it's also the players, right? I mean, one of the key learnings is we talk about chips so much, but we forget that often the game weeks are kind of determined by one player. Game week 29 was determined by Coutinho's 24-pointer. Yep. If you had him, you did great. If you didn't, you didn't. Game week 28 was James. If you captain James, you got the points. Otherwise, you didn't. So whether you've played the chip, it gives you a higher chance of owning that player. So as played his free hit chip in 28, got James. You and I, we transferred in James and we captained him. We got those points as well. So you didn't have to play the chip. It turned out to do well. KDB is an example in game week 36. A lot of people who didn't wildcard just went for KDB either because of the risk appetite or kind of they felt that that's the best play. That's where you make your gain. So I think not fixating on chips as well is a key. But banging the right player is not that easy. It's easier said than done, right?
Yep. We try, but it's not always easy. I still look back at that De Bruyne haul and think the signs weren't there for that. I'm sorry. I know obviously people will say they're geniuses for doing that, and I've seen some people with chalk captains, but I just can't believe how easy Wolves made it for him. I'll never forgive them. I will never forgive them for that.
It's a luck and skill thing, right? Why is it? So I got De Bruyne. I sold Kane and I got De Bruyne, but I didn't do it because I wanted De Bruyne. I did it because I wanted Son in game week 37 and 38. Yeah. And De Bruyne felt like a nice kind of path to get to Son instead of doing the Kane to Son directly, because Tottenham had the worst double.
Yeah.
So was it skill? Was it luck? Of course, there's a lot of luck that you end up owning KDB. And I obviously didn't think he's the best player in the double because I didn't captain him. I captained Salah. But there is a lot of luck in it. There's no doubt.
4 goals. I mean, if he gets 10, 15 points, you're like, yeah, fair enough. It's De Bruyne, a great double game week. But 30 points. Whew.
I mean, my highlight of the season was the last 3 kings of the game week were players I owned. I mean, what a nice end to the season. It was De Bruyne, then Maddison, and then Kulusevski.
Yeah.
Oh, I had none of them.
You had none of those 3?
I had Maddison. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Then if you're on players, let's go to players. Let's do this one a little quickly because we should also spend time on the future. So maybe 5 minutes per team. So Andy, we'll cover you first. And for the listeners and viewers, what we've done here is, now that we've talked about our season, our strategies, transfers, let's talk about the players. And we'll talk about the players in the lens of who we owned and who gave us the highest gains and losses. And this is from the website FPL Optimized, where you can check for your own team. And this gain is essentially the gain over the masses, so effective ownership. So even though you own Salah all season, you didn't gain much from owning him all season because he had an high EO, and many times it was a negative effect of owning Salah and not captaining him. So for you, Andy, talk about the players that did well for you. What did you see in them to hold them that long and get those gains and things like that?
Yeah, in Son, I saw the Golden Boot winner and the best player in the Premier League. So I just kind of, hopped on it early and had him for the rest of the season. Not a fan or anything. James, I think I got lucky.
Hold on, Son.
Yeah, hang on a second. There is no way in going into game week 30, you thought this player could get the Golden Boot. No way.
Game week 30, yeah.
He got 2, 3, 6, 8. Yeah. He got 12 goals since game week 30. So 12 goals in 8 games he got from that. He was well off it. Going into that game, I never even considered him for a second. To be honest, Kane was so clear for me. You did so well not ignoring that kind of noise around him. I think.
Yeah, viewers of Burning Questions know that Andy in game week 33 said, or Game Week 32 said, Son is just looking off it. There's no way I would go for Son. Kane is the better pick because there's no strikers. I mean, people know who are listening to this. It was true.
He was
and
right.
Had you not wildcarded,
he was right. No. He was right.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
delete that video from the library.
No, as you're right. I think last season, what happened was he was priced cheaper, right? I think 9 million, maybe. I think it was 9 million the previous season to this season. So I just had him the entire season just because I just wanted him, and it panned out really well. So I have this weird thing where whenever I have an opportunity to get Son, I'll just get him. And there's that phase between 26 to 32, 33, where he was getting a lot of hate, maybe it was a little bit earlier. And I think I just kind of got a little bit emotional about it. And I said, all right, well, I'm just going to keep Son and trust my
He'll
guy.
prove everyone wrong.
And I just didn't want Kane. And I, that's not the only reason I kept it. It was just very difficult to get to Kane, right? Once you have Son, it's like same thing, right? If you have Kane, it's very difficult to get to Son, which is why I probably missed out on Kulusevski quite a bit because it's hard to have both those midfielders because you're already taking up a slot with Son. So that Kane and Kulu combo was very popular combo, and I think if I had gone that throughout that phase and then eventually got to Son, then you're a wizard and you sort of know what to do. But I just had Son from the start, which is why probably I kept him through his good run after in Game Week 31 plus. Yeah.
Nice. I think that same Son to Kane was the biggest variance factor for a lot of managers in the season. I mean, Tom Stevenson, he's in the FF Scout Hall of Fame top 10. He sold Son for Kane in Game Week 31. So I'm using that as a reference of a lot of people believed. And it is a function of both things. Kane had better underlying stats. There were no strikers. So if you had Kane, you're basically solving the striker problem as well. And he was on pens. It just made sense. But the way it turned out, completely smashed people's seasons.
Yeah.
All right. So Andy, in your gains, and then I think James we've all talked about, and this will be common for all of us. We'll all have James because we're all wildcarders Game Week 8. We got his points, and then we had him in Game Week 28 as well. So James is good. Ramsdale, because you've owned him as your keeper pretty much all season. Robertson, talk to me about Robertson. What did you see in him? When did you get him?
Yeah, it was just a great pickup. I think I can't remember when. It was maybe late 26, 7. I'm not sure.
I think I remember. You took him in for a hit Game Week 29, which was their double.
Okay, perfect. So
yeah.
The reason was I think we're struggling to find a third Liverpool asset. And because Jota wasn't available and Jota was, bench rotation and there's really no one else to go to. So I just wanted 3 Liverpool assets, and Robertson and Trent felt like attackers. So, I just got lucky there, to be honest. Just good player, good stats, looks good, one of the best teams. So, that's why I had Robertson.
Good. So, one key learning looking at your top 10 is these are all good players in good teams. Son, James, Ramsdale, Robertson, Saka, Foden, Bowen, Cancelo, Jota. The only anomaly is Odegaard. But we talked about Odegaard, right? I think he's a good player, but is he an FPL pick or not?
I think Odegaard, I got quite lucky too. He had this one ridiculous goal, and but at the time, I know, Pras, you think it's not as good of a pick as Martinelli, because I could have gone Martinelli, right? It was the debate between these two, but I just kind of saw right before I picked Odegaard, I just saw 2 or 3 games where he looked really, really good and really, really involved and very up top, very just pulling the strings. And that was, eye test that was good enough for me to take a chance on him than over Martinelli. And one of the things that one of my friends recently told me during that phase was like, oh man, I should have gone Martinelli over Odegaard, because as said, always FOMOing. He said that you should be really proud of your differentials, and that like has stuck with me till now, and probably moving forward in FPL. These are the 1-2 picks that like for example, Ash went for Bruno, right? And you should be very proud of that, right? And for me, Odegaard is one of those guys that I don't have any regrets going for, because I really believed in him at the time. Yeah.
I think one key thing with Martinelli is that he had one good week, really. He got 15 points against Leeds. I think he scored the week before that and got 7. But other than that, I mean, it was a sea of 2s and 3s for a lot of people. And again, it was, unless you had him for those 2 weeks, you've probably had quite a bad experience with him. So you look at Odegaard's points and think that apart from that, take those 2 weeks out of it, there probably wasn't much in it between them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so that's good. So Andy, you're in your losses. So this is an interesting one. Your biggest loss is Rafinha.
Yep. I have the story behind that.
Tell us your story.
So you remember 16 through 19, Leeds had an awful run of fixtures, 15 through 19, something like that. And I've always been keen on Rafinha. I've always thought he's an amazing undervalued asset. And I've had him probably throughout that first half of the season, prior to 15 or 16. I transferred him out 1 week before that I don't know why I did that. And I transferred him back in, which was a waste of 2 hits. And I missed his points during that time where I transferred him out. And then 16 comes around and his fixtures aren't good. So I'm just like, forget about this guy. And then, 20 onwards, I have other priorities. And he just pretty much handed it to me for the rest of the season, right? So Rafinha is one of those big ones with high EO that I probably shouldn't go against next season, especially if there's a guy that's undervalued like him in terms of price. Yeah,
he's not going to stay at Leeds. I don't think he's going to stay at Leeds anyway. But I think as a principle, you're right. If it's a player who's got good underlyings, who's had a change in the way people were valuing his effective or his EV, he got pens, which we didn't know he had. And on the negative side, Leeds were not as attacking under Marsh versus Bielsa. So look, I don't think it was a mistake to not go for Rafinha, but he's one of those players that I think he's a darling of engaged managers because you get points from set pieces, penalties. He can assist, he can score goals, but then you're also backing a team that's in relegation. So it's a difficult one to always sell, and he's always a difficult one to buy. And this was a season where we had Bowen, Foden, Saka, so many options in that price bracket. So I don't think going for one or the other was the wrong play.
Where do you think he's going to go, Pras?
Depends. I mean, I think there were rumors of Bayern Munich. They've been a little quiet in terms of where he'll end up, but I doubt he's going to. What do you think, Az? Is he going to stay?
No, he won't
Brighton,
stay.
Maybe?
Yeah, that'd be nice. Although it'd be hard. It'd be difficult for him to get in the team at the moment, the way we're playing. I don't know. I think any team. Honestly, I think any team in the world would have him. I think he could go to somewhere like. I mean, I know Liverpool are absolutely stacked, but he could go to Liverpool and do a good job for them in the same way that Jota and Diaz have done.
For sure.
He could go to City. If they're getting rid of Jesus and players like that, and Sterling might be off as well. He could go anywhere. He's that good. He's a very frustrating FPL asset for a lot of people. He should be getting way more points than he does. He had a really good spell of being reliable, trickling with these like 5 to 9 points. 1 double-digit return all season, though, kind of shows that this explosiveness just isn't really there for him. But I think realistically he goes to a top side, and if it's one in the Premier League, he's not an option for us because he'll be rotated too much, which is a shame.
Absolutely. All right, finishing up on Andy. So some of your other losses, Salah, I think mainly out of the game week 9 captaincy. Not to bring that on you again. Kulusevski, you talked about why you didn't go for him, given that you had a midfield slot for Son. Bruno, I'll talk about Bruno when I come to my section as well. It's more of that captaincy between Man United, the Man United doubles. Rudiger, I think that's not a loss because you went for James or Chilwell instead. So I think that's good. Let's cover me then, and I'll try to again keep it to 5 minutes. My biggest gains, so James, Robertson, I think these are guys who I just valued from the beginning of the season. So as soon as the wildcard came, James was in my team. As soon as the Liverpool option. So with Robertson, it was interesting. I had Tsimikas early season. Then I had Jota for bulk of the season. And then when Jota didn't become an option, I had Robertson. So there was actually never a point in the season I didn't have triple Liverpool, but that third Liverpool just changed depending on circumstances. I mean, Jota was the best third while Firmino was out and Salah and Mane were at AFCON. And then it turned out to be Robertson. So I just felt we were gifted with a Liverpool team where there's less rotation. There's more certainty of their assets. So I was on Robertson as soon as Jota became a non-option. So I'm glad I got a lot of his points. I had him on my Gameweek 26 wildcard, and he was in my team throughout. Ramsdale, I've had my keeper throughout the season since when he became available. Foden, I've always backed. I think this will be a common theme amongst all of us. Kulusevski, I've had since basically, Baker from above average FPL kind of played him up as the new signing, and we all went for it. And I think big credit to people who were watching him early doors and they called it that this guy is going to be nailed and this guy is just going to improve the team. I think there were some early lucky returns with Kulusevski with, passing the ball to Son and then him scoring a worldie or him crossing the ball and Kane getting a penalty. But I think overall he's shown that he was absolutely terrific value for 6.5 million.
Signing of the season for me, Kulusevski. Yeah. I think the way he transformed Spurs, I didn't see that coming. I thought he would be a kind of a squad player. You're adapting from a completely different league, really young as well, in a team in transition with Conte in there as well, not playing great. I think few players have come in January and had the impact that he's had, and they wouldn't have got top four without him. I'm absolutely. But
what a manager, right? I mean, Conte comes in, gets the right people in the right positions. Bentancur, Kulusevski, makes Doherty like the next Roberto Carlos or Cafu on that side. And I mean, just good managers just make such a massive difference. It's crazy.
Can he do it over multiple seasons though? That's the question. He's never been a manager that stayed at a club for more than 2-3 seasons. So he is very capable of falling out with players and pissing off the board and all that kind of stuff. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with him. Even in this summer, there's no guarantees that he'll stay. Although I think he probably will now.
Yeah, I agree.
I've been reading. He's been given like 190 million war chest, if that is called a war chest, because nowadays, some big clubs get way more. But guaranteed at least 6 signings. Again, this is kind of rumors, but I think Conte staying and not staying will really depend on how much Levy actually starts to support in terms of transfers, because the last few years they invested in their stadium and everything's ready to go. Champions League, they have Harry Kane, they have Son. They really need, and they have good surrounding players. Kulusevski is an amazing player. Just a couple more big signings, and look, maybe they can't win the league, but at least they can
challenge,
upgrade and challenge.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Yeah. It's the defense, isn't it, that needs work. I mean, a new left back, new right back, probably 2 new central defenders, something like that. And also, as I was just going to say that I was very impressed by Eric Dyer this season because he gets a lot of hate, but you forget he was the starting center back for England in 2018, I believe. Eric Dyer is very underrated. He's like a leader in that team and pretty solid defender, intelligent defender. So they have some pieces. They really do. They just need to, as you mentioned, upgrade the wing backs for sure. Yeah.
Nice. So let's go to my losses then very quickly. I think my losses are, I could have called these as well. So Son destroying season since game week 31, he did mine. I just didn't, I had Kane. So that's quite simple. And I didn't want to make the switch. I did eventually make the switch in game week 36. Not for Kane, but to KDB first. Then my losses, Bruno Fernandes. As a Man United fan, the moment Ronaldo joined, I never owned Bruno again. So I didn't own Bruno from game week 4 onwards. So for all those doubles, and I just backed Ronaldo throughout. As it happens in the doubles where I backed Ronaldo, Bruno got all the hauls. And for the one double where Ronaldo actually hauled, I didn't have Ronaldo or Bruno. So I kind of just missed out on Man United points. And it's been a miserable season. And it is what it is with Man United. I do low-key think that Man United will provide some of the best value players next season if they're valued as such. but we will come to future predictions in a second. In terms of other losses for me, I don't think there was any big ones. I mean, these are all now under 30. So Rudiger, Rafinha. I had Rafinha for good patches, but I lost some points because he was well owned. White, I never had. Mount, I never had all season. Smith Rowe, I never had all season because I went for Saka and throughout. So that was me.
12 million, Bruno. 12 million he cost at the start. He had 3 good game weeks.
Crazy.
3 double-digit hauls. I mean, after the hat-trick in game week 1, I saw no way in which he wouldn't be a cert in our teams for the whole season. I can't ever remember a drop off, because not just, at the start of the season, maybe a player comes in, doesn't perform all season and then gets dropped. But for a player to come in, score a hat-trick game week 1, and then for the drop off he had, I don't think we'll ever see something like that again for a premium asset.
Agreed. I mean, yeah, and we'll see how he plays next season. He will be more pivotal to the team. I mean, we don't even know if Ronaldo's staying anymore. So it'll be nice if he's back down to 9.5 million or whatever, and then he's kind of becoming pivotal again. He's definitely one to watch. Yep. But just the way they were playing, with the way Ronaldo was setting up the team, taking the pens away from him a lot, and we all saw it, right? It wasn't something like a Kane or Son situation where we kept on saying it's not going to happen. We all said when Ronaldo joined, my transfer when Man United were playing Newcastle was selling Bruno for a hit to get Ronaldo in, because we saw it coming.
I think what I'm particularly interested about Fernandes, though, is looking at the underlying stats, particularly his chances created. They weren't that different to last season, and they were best in the league. No player would create more chances than Bruno Fernandes over the season. So it was definitely a conversion problem with the United, and maybe if he'd picked up a few more assists here and there and things, he might have been an option. But for 12 million, you've got to be scoring goals. Like you can't get away with one or two assists sporadically. You've got to be hitting the net, and he just wasn't doing that at all.
Not at all. Should we go to you, Az?
We come to me. Yep. Do you want me to read them out?
Sure, go for it.
My second one is great. My top one's Foden, which I am a bit surprised with. I guess I just had him at all the right times. A lot of people frustrated by him. I'd say that he overall had a really frustrating season, Foden, in terms of FPL. Playing as that kind of false 9 for Man City, playing most games. I expected him to get more than he did. Luckily, he got the returns where I needed. I captained him a few times, and he scored points in those. So my memories of him are good. Other people's won't be. Bruno's in second. I've never owned a player where I've benefited from all their points in the same way that Bruno did. I mean, you talk about differential. His ownership was like 0.02% or something when I bought him in. So yeah, that's got to be the highlight of the season.
He scored 67 points.
Yeah.
And you have gained 55 points.
Well, I would have had all of them if I hadn't used that bloody free hit chip, because I took him out on that, and then I would have had them all. That would have been great.
Amazing.
And then it's James and Smith Rowe and Ramsdale. So I mean, my top sort of 5 players were really the kind of instrumental players in my season, really. Particularly James and Ramsdale, I'd say early doors were the key picks on the kind of wild card. And then the same as you, I mean, looking at my losses, I mean, Son just every week. It's horrible having that kind of feeling going into any game week that he's going to score, but there's no easy way of getting him without selling Salah or Kane and trying to make other moves that won't be as effective as if you just bought him in, but you just couldn't. It was horrible. It was genuinely like sleepless nights worrying about what Son's going to do at home to Leicester, and then he just gets a hat trick, and you're like, well, yeah, of course he did. We all knew that was gonna happen. And then looking at some other ones, I mean, Alonso, I didn't get in him on early because I thought that Chilwell rotation was a bit too worrying, and then his stats were really good, and I probably should have had him for a few weeks towards the end of the season. But I was such a Reece James fanboy that he was always the one that I wanted. Interesting that Saka's on there as well. I think largely that comes from when I free hitted him out as well, and he got his 15 points. And then De Bruyne on the list as well. Less said about him the better. So I like these lists because there's a story behind all of them. I think it's a really nice thing to kind of round off your season. Head over to FPL Optimize and check this out and see who your heroes and villains are. Because I look at both of these lists and I'm just like, yep, agreed. I can see exactly why these players are on the list.
Yeah. Indeed. And I think neither of us or either of us think that any one of these were particularly a mistake in the losses, right? I mean, it was just one of those things where if you missed out on some points, you backed Kane more, and that's fine. That wasn't a mistake. I mean, if you didn't have Kulusevski, that wasn't a mistake. You just chose to go differently. For Bruno, I just felt Ronaldo is the better player, and now it seems very obvious. But in the double game week, everyone went Bruno and captained him, and the guy goes mad with 25 points. I mean, what can you do? So I think there's less to learn here. It's just something you just have to go with it.
Son was a mistake. Son should have been, transfer number one on any week. I mean, he got 3 double-digit hauls in a row. West Ham, Newcastle, Villa. The signs were there. He was playing up front. Kane had been dropping deep again. That should have just been a priority transfer, I think. But
only 2 weeks before, people are doing the other way.
And that just shows how quickly things can turn around and how kind of open and flexible you've got to be to things. Yeah. And it's why a lot of people, more so than I've seen in previous seasons, talk about form as just being nonsense. Because, how can you work out when form ends and when form begins? Form begins when a player is fully fit and has decent fixtures, like what Son has. You get on it early.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's very, very tricky to predict form.
I'm with you. Shall we move to the last couple of sections? I mean, we're getting close to a couple of hours.
No, getting close to black box length.
I blame Az for this.
I just have that effect on
exactly. I mean, 1 hour is just rookie numbers. 2 is minimum. But look, we'll do this one quickly, and we're going to keep it more like, just future thoughts. We don't need explanations. It's more like just what's your gut instinct. But before we do that, I think you have the table up with the rotation and the teams, right? So let's spend a few minutes on this and what jumps out. So first, to describe the table itself, this is a table that's produced by The Athletic, and it shows you how many times the starting lineup has changed for the 20 teams in the Premier League. So over the 38 game week period. Now, obviously, you could have had a situation where West Ham have played one lineup and then changed it for Europa League, had the same lineup in the Premier League. This should show that the lineup is unchanged, but that's fine. That's what we care about, which is as FPL managers, how many times did teams change their lineup? So, most surprising thing here for me was Chelsea 0. There was not a single Premier League game where Chelsea had the same team 1 week after the other. Then you have your boys Brighton, which is basically, Graham Potter being an elite manager.
Me. Yeah,
doesn't. Yeah, we've all. Yeah, you have no idea how to pick Brighton players, and you've got some good ones given how the team's been performing. Interestingly, Liverpool is the third. Now we tend to think of Liverpool as the very steady team with predictable assets. Now I think with the big hitters, this probably could still be the case. We don't know how this goes into next season. But Salah, Mane, Robertson, Trent, at least until game week 30, had shown some predictability. After that, nothing. But I was surprised to see this for Liverpool. Only twice they had the same lineup. I mean, did that surprise you guys?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's that front attack, isn't it? Really, I think we still going into next season. I mean, we all know that the favoured front three at the moment is probably Salah, Mane, and Diaz. But that could easily change. Jota could easily come in if Firmino stays. They've just signed this new Carvalho from Fulham as well. Is he going to get some game time too? And we're going to talk about subs and things going forward. And you've got to think there's going to be a lot more rotation. Maybe Liverpool do go stronger in. Maybe we will see more unchanged lineups, but then more subs kind of as the game continues. I mean, and they've been involved in all competitions, haven't they? So changing lineups as they've had to do that to kind of give rest to some of the first team.
Yeah. Andy, you were going to say something?
Yeah, this is interesting because I did notice that we always talk about Pep Roulette, but there are a lot of times where we're expecting changes and Man City lineup ended up being the same, and you can see them sort of in that mid area. And then there was that time, especially towards the latter part of the season, where Klopp started to rotate like crazy, and Klopp became the new Pep, and you can see Liverpool down there. I did think that Chelsea rotated, but not to that extent. So that's very interesting to see. And maybe things change because next season, when Chelsea are in the title race, we'll see less rotation, especially in the first half of the season.
One thing that really surprised me about this table in general is just how many changes teams make week on week. I didn't think it would be. I didn't think there'd be. You look at West Ham. So we'll talk about West Ham in a second, but they had the most unchanged lineups with 9. And then, you look at kind of the majority of teams have got 5 and below, something like that. So only 5 weeks have they, because you're looking at the team from 1 week compared to the next. That isn't very many, especially for teams like Norwich, Palace, Villa, Watford. These are teams where you'd expect them, without the squad depth, you'd expect them to be a bit more settled. But actually, they're making a lot of changes. I mean, you look at some of these average changes. I mean, Chelsea, over 3 changes a game is a lot of changes, especially when I think I could quite comfortably tell you what Chelsea's strongest 11 is, but they're making 3 changes on that, across these different games. Look at Liverpool with 3, Man City 2.8. So they're the kind of the main ones. Leicester 2.9. That's obviously because of Europe and things. But yeah, I mean, we'll talk about West Ham in a second. West Ham surprises me the most, though, given that their squad depth isn't very big and they've had Europe. I would have thought actually they would be having to protect that first 11 more. But look at Antonio playing every match.
Correct. And they were one of those that actually ended up very early season having a separate team for Europa League. So I think that contributed a little bit, where in the very early Europa League stages, West Ham weren't playing the Antonios in the Europa Leagues, and we could actually predict that Antonio will start in the Premier League. And in some cases later on, he just continued to play all the games. So I think you're right. And for the listeners, West Ham do have if you want to say, the most predictable lineup, which is counterintuitive. And the second most is Arsenal. And this is obviously Arsenal. We've seen the injuries, but the benefit of seeing this is they were not in Europe, right? So they could play the same team over and over. And that kind of bore out in this table, where they only made 1.7 changes per game. Spurs are the third. They had 7 unchanged lineups, about 1.8. And then the Burnley, Newcastle, Brentford, Southampton, Norwich. Even though they're at the top of the table, there's still a lot, as said. I want to talk about Man City. I mean, we talk about Pep Roulette and unpredictability, and, Man City are mid-table here. Man City's numbers are as follows. They make about 2.8 changes per game, and they've had 4 unchanged lineups. Now, 4 unchanged lineups doesn't sound too much, but in the context of other teams, they're mid-table. Why do we hate Pep so much?
Well, I think. Sorry, go
ahead, Des.
No, you go. It's your show.
I think when it comes to Man City, there are a few locks in the team, right? Cancelo, he literally played every single game, Europe or Premier League, and guys like Laporte. But it's their front line that, Silva, for example, is locked in that team for this season. And it's that front line that they have so much talent that's where we want to go as FPL managers. We want to pick out the Grealish. By the way, I think Grealish is going to have an outstanding season next year. You heard it here first. There's the Mahrez, there's a Foden, and the Jesus now as well. And so that's why we think Pep Roulette in our brains, because we have a tough time picking out those starting attacking players. Yeah.
But yeah, we have been blessed this year with a less rotation or more predictable. And I don't want to take away Luke's thunder here, because he's done a terrific job of predicting Pep. But I think it's been an easier season than others to guess, because you've had Cancelo who's nailed, Diaz is nailed, Walker has been nailed when he's been fit. You had Rodri who's nailed. So there have been 5 or 6 players, like you said, and then you kind of see rotation. So as you were going to say something before, Andy, as well.
I was just going to say that, maybe this is a little bit controversial, but I don't think City have a tremendous amount of squad depth at the moment. I know they've got kind of top players, but obviously you've got Jesus and Mahrez competing for the right, and Sterling and Grealish, competing for the spot on the left. But you can basically predict most of their team. It's Diaz and Laporte in the centre, Cancelo, Foden up top, De Bruyne and Rodri. I mean, that's 6. And then one of Gundogan or Bernardo. But Bernardo was so strong all season, one of the players of the season. So that's 7 players that you can predict almost each week for them. So I'm not totally surprised to see that. And look at when they got defensive injuries and they were having to play Fernandinho at centre back, and Zinchenko came in and stuff. They're a lot weaker. And I think it's going to be an interesting summer for them because I think Jesus is going to leave, for example. They've got Haaland coming in for big money. I think Sterling could well go because the talk is that he wants assurances about his start, but is he going to get them? Because where does Foden play? Foden might go over to the left, and then you've got Grealish there as well. So I don't think Sterling necessarily features in Pep's strongest team, and I don't think he can guarantee him 20, 25 games a season, starting. And looking at the transfer page of City, I mean, look at their players: Cakey up front, Delap in midfield, Edozie, McCarthy, Palmer, Fernandinho in defence, Wilson, Esbrand, Mbete, Egan Riley. They're calling on a lot of these kind of youth players to fill in, and I think like you said, I think it has been an easier job to predict Pep this season.
Nice. Okay, let's leave it here. I would say one other thing, in terms of the future, given 5 subs, this is likely to get worse. Or do you reckon that because you'll be able to give those minutes to the players in game, the starting lineups will get predictable? What do you think, Az?
I don't think it's going to change things as much as people think. I think, we try and not target players who get 60 minutes anyway, not only because they only get 60 minutes, obviously, but also because those players are the most at risk of not starting the next game. I mean, Barnes was a perfect example of that for me. He was a player that if he got 90 minutes, it meant he was playing well and getting you points. If he's coming off at 60, it means he hasn't played well, and Rodgers is probably looking to change the system and bring Iheanacho on, which means that his place in the next team is at risk. So I do look at teams like Liverpool. I think Liverpool attack is going to be interesting. Do I really want to spend 30.5 on Salah if we start seeing kind of more rotation, for them, given they've got so many attacking options? But I think a lot of teams don't have that luxury of being able to take. So the key players are still going to play 90 minutes.
Sure. Agreed. Andy, anything else to add before we go to the last section?
No, that's good.
Okay, we're going to keep the next section very brief, and we will keep it as almost like a lightning question, or what is it called? Basically, 1-word answers, lightning round.
Do it.
And I'm gonna host you two, and I'm gonna basically throw some burning questions that we've got from
Nice.
people on Twitter and others. So, who are your must-own players regardless of price? So, no, without knowing the price, pick your 1, 2, 3, or you can say none, whatever. I'll go with you, Andy, first.
For next season's beginning,
Yeah.
I'll go with 3.
Okay.
Son, Salah, and Haaland.
You can't afford all 3. Come on. Then
Oh,
you can't have any defense.
Okay. I thought it was just like anybody.
No. You have for your FPL team, obviously.
Oh, okay. I see. That's serious, huh? I'm gonna go Trent, Son, and Haaland.
So no Salah. Okay. All right. No, we won't delve into it. We'll have a whole preseason to talk about it. As your 1, 2, or 3.
Haaland, James. I think that's they're the only ones that I would commit to at this stage. I think I can't see any way we all don't start with Haaland.
Yeah.
I'll go with Trent, Cancelo as the only 2, because I think the premiums will. Because we'll just have to play around with the premiums based on fixtures. But Haaland, I agree with you, depending on price. But we are not supposed to talk about it. Just give 1-word answers.
It's hard not to.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. In terms of the teams, which teams do you think will provide the best value in defense? So we talk about, the 4.5 defenders or the 4.0 defenders.
I guess, yeah, at least one of them, right?
Okay.
Maybe a 5.0 is more realistic. From the cheaper teams, right? Newcastle, maybe Villa. No,
Fair.
Villa's expensive.
Sonaldo not really getting the idea of quickfire questions.
Okay, Az, what's yours?
I think Newcastle's the obvious one for me.
Yeah.
I think even if they come in, Trippier's going to be interesting if he comes in at 5 million again. I think we're going to see more people switching.
Very tempting.
Yeah, we're going to see more people switching to 4 at the back next season, and a player like Trippier at 5 could be bargaining season.
Nice. I'm going to go Palace because I think their defensive numbers are very good and they haven't really done that well to all go up to 5.5. So I think there will be some value in Palace defenders. Okay. Let's just now. So this is now outside of FPL. I'm going to ask you just basic predictions on how do you think this team does in the table or more in general. So Man United, Andy, you first.
I think let's see how their signings go this summer, and I think they're in year one of a true rebuild.
Top 4, top 6, top 10, bottom half.
Top six.
Okay. As
top 6.
Unfortunately, I agree. It's going to take some time. Newcastle.
I think that would be a good result for them, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, steady progress. I think we'd take
Top
steady
10.
progress.
Top 10.
Newcastle, you said top 10, Andy?
Yeah. Yep.
As, can I interest you in a top 6?
No, I don't think
No
so.
chance.
I don't
No
think so.
chance.
I think, coming 11th this season is incredible. I think they've got to finish in the top half of the season next year. I could see them finishing 8th, something like that.
Okay, I agree. Top 8. Arsenal.
Top 6. Oh, sorry.
They're going to struggle next season, I think, more so than this year. I wouldn't be totally surprised to see them finishing lower than 6th, but I'll put them in the top 6.
Top 6, top 8.
I think yeah, it'll be between them and I even think Newcastle for top 6 because I think Chelsea, Liverpool, City, Spurs top 4, Man United, Arsenal or Newcastle. These are the teams, right? I mean, next one is Leicester actually. So do we think then Leicester is outside top 8, even though they don't have any Europe or anything?
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I could see. I mean, Leicester haven't got Europe, have they? Or have they got Conference League? They finished 8th. I'm not sure what that.
I think
means.
West Ham have the Conference League.
Yeah,
And Arsenal's going to have Thursday, Sunday games.
I worry for Arsenal as well.
yeah. Well, and United as well. I could absolutely see them finishing. I'll stick with what I said. I think Arsenal, United top 6, and Leicester 7th, something like that. Just missing out.
It's a good top 10 next season.
It is. It's a very good top 10. It's yeah. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. There's always a surprise team. Villa, for example, with Gerrard. I mean, they're ambitious. Signing Coutinho, they could break into the top 6, or have hopes of breaking, or at least challenging the top 6. Yeah, it should be really
Everton maybe.
Everton,
get some defenders. Yeah,
if they can get it right. Although I don't think Frank survives until Christmas, to be honest.
I don't either. I think Everton will be in relegation again, in the relegation battle. I've not put relegation questions here because I don't want to hurt Mark's feelings or anybody who's in the playoff final. So we leave relegation to another time. That's not a team we target anyway for our picks. Obviously, we'll target them for teams to target. But let's go now to the last segment, which is random player price guesses. Right? I'm going to just throw a name out there. And we will just, without any explanation, just give us a crystal ball of what price we think that player will be. So obviously we start with Andy, and what do you think Son's price will be? And by the way, I'm noting it down so that I'm just going to compare it sometime later.
I think 11 million.
Okay, as Mane,
11.
I think the biggest mistake FPL did this season was overpriced Mane, right?
Mane.
How nice would it have been if he was like 9.5?
They should have priced him same as Son at 10.5, something like that. That would have been really interesting.
All right, then I will predict Robertson's price, and I'm going to predict 7.5.
Okay.
Okay, next for Andy again, Haaland.
What was Kane and Salah when they began? 12, 13?
Salah was 13. Was he 13.5 or 13?
13.5, I think.
13.
Season. This season he was 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Haaland's going to be 12.5, 12 or 12.5.
Kane was 12.5 at the start of this season.
12 or 12.5. Yeah. I'll go with 12.5.
Okay, as Trippier.
Hopeful 5.
He's going to be okay.
I think he's going to be 5. I think he's going to be 5.
He's going to be more.
Really?
He's on free kicks. They're very good defensively.
He'll be max 5.5.
5.5. Okay, but I'm not going to change your answer.
I'm hoping he comes in at 5 though, so I'll go with that.
Okay, I'll go for then James. I'm going to go James 7. No, I'm going to go James 8 million. I think wing backs will be a lot more expensive this year. Trent is going to be 8.5. Cancelo is going to be 8. Robertson's going to be 7.5, 8.
James,
I just think they have to.
James won't be more than Robertson.
Okay, 7.5 then. 7.5. Okay, we should not be debating it, but okay, 7.5. All right, Kulusevski for you, Andy.
7.5.
Only 7. He was 6.5 now.
7.5.
Okay.
Not supposed to be discussing them, Pras.
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, KDB for you as.
Oh, what was he this season? He was. Was he 12 million? Yeah, same. I reckon 12 million again.
So high. No one's going to buy KDB. Wilson. And now I put Wilson here because I think Newcastle will be very good next season. I'm predicting them to be competing for top 6. And if they don't sign a striker, I think Wilson will be one of the best value strikers next season. So I'm going to go for 8.5. But I think that'll be great value if he's the only striker. You think that's too much?
Yeah.
He's going to be great value, even at 8.5, I think. Okay, Bruno Fernandes for you, Andy.
Hopefully he's like a 9.5, but I think more realistically like a 10.5.
They're going to kill him if it's 10.5.
Yeah, they're going to kill him. He should be a 9.95. 9.
I think they'll make him tempting. I think they'll make him 9.5, 10. That would be my guess. Nice.
All right, I go with Andy's 10.5. Madison for you as. No Europe, no distractions, number 10.
He was 7 million this season, and I thought that was a good price for him. I'm hoping he'll come in at 7 again, but I can see him getting a hike to 7.5. So I'll say 7.5.
7.5. Okay.
I have going nuts, by the way.
Yeah,
section.
I like this.
This is a good preseason content for us, Brosnan.
I'll go Luis Diaz. That's a very interesting one, especially if Salah, Mane, anyone leaves. Not to offend any Liverpool fans, but he could be really good, and I'm going for 9.5. So basically, similar to a.
I'm stealing this stream idea, by the way. We're gonna do a price predictor stream.
No, do that.
please.
All right, Andy Cancelo.
Oh man, what? I mean, the max is what 7.5 for a defender, right?
So, no, there's no max. I think it'll be more than 8 this year for a lot of them. They're cheat codes, man. I mean, basically, FPL have to make sure that we can't have 2 premiums and 4 wing backs again. They have to make it hard.
What'd you guys put James at?
7.5.
So Cancelo is probably like, if you break the 7.5 barrier, then probably an 8.5. 8.5, something like that.
I think you're way off with these, both of you.
With the wing backs,
you think it's going to be priced higher?
Yeah, I think they don't go this high with the defenders, because the defenders are the spot where I think FPL want people to have Cancelo, Trent, Diaz, James.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's 7.5.
As soon as they start making all these players too high and you're having to fill your squad with cheap 5, 6, they lose interest of people. So I think the defenders are I agree. In terms of like integrity of the game, I agree with you. These players should be priced like that. I just don't think FPL will go that high. We're not going to see 4 defenders like this priced at 8 million and above.
But then if I bring my game week 1, okay, I know I get what you're saying, but if I bring my game week 1 draft and I say I've got Trent, Cancelo, James, and Robertson, but only one of Salah and Haaland, and you have both Salah and Haaland, and you can't afford more than 1 or 2 of the wing backs, that's the choice I want FPL to give us.
Yeah,
but we won't get there. I hear what you're saying.
But can you afford like 4 8 million defenders and even 1? Well, I guess you get 1 premium. Right?
Only 1.
Yeah. So then people. So that's again, it's FPL. So you can't have Kane, Salah, De Bruyne,
Correct.
All these players that you kind of want. I think they've got to be a bit careful not to. I know that they want to create choice, but you've got to remember FPL's game isn't about making the perfect game. FPL's game is about bringing people into playing it. So I do think they're going to want people to have as many as they can. Whether that's right or wrong is a different sort of topic. So
I hear you.
As Mark said on Black Box, it is the most difficult year ever for pricing.
Right.
It'll make or break the game, right from the off.
Hear you. And by the way, with the 5 subs, wing backs are the ones that come off first. So maybe that's another thing that kind of brings their value a little down. So actually, your 5th one as is TA. So what do you think? It's going to stay 7.5?
I could see him going up to 8. I think 8 is the most a defender's ever been. I think Baines was 8, was he, many years ago?
I think I remember 8. I definitely remember. I seem to remember 8.5 as well.
I think Trent is 8, and that's the most expensive one. I think the others come in around the 6.5 to 7.5 mark. I
mean, the Spurs wing backs, whoever they sign, they are the ones to go for.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, talk about Jed Speds, isn't there, from Nottingham Forest? I mean, he comes in. I could see him coming in at 5. From the Championship, he could come in at 5, 5.5, something like that, and then he's. You mentioned cheat code. He could be that. That could be that pick.
All right, my last one is Kane. Now you've got Son at 11. There's no way that Son is cheaper than Kane this year. No way. Maybe they change his position and Son becomes a forward and Kane becomes a forward, but we're not going into positional changes here. But I really doubt. If Son is also forward, then maybe Kane is 11.5. But if I'm supposed to give one word answer, 11 as well.
Get carried away, can't you?
All right.
11 as well.
Okay. So I've noted these down and we will revisit them once the prices are launched. But this was more fun anyway. More fun anyway. But last question, last lightning round question. One change to FPL for next season. What would you make as you first?
First half season chips.
First half season chips? I think that's great. What about you, Andy?
What do you mean by that as?
I mean, rather than having chips that you can only play once in a season, you have, similar to the wildcard, chips that you can play in the first half of the season and they reset after Christmas.
I love that. So you basically have 2 of each chip.
Yeah. I just can't see any drawbacks to it at all whatsoever. I can't believe they haven't implemented it already. Keeps people engaged. It takes away having to wait until the final game weeks of the season. It increases a kind of a bit of fun. You can have a bit of fun in a single game week. There's just no reason to not do it.
I think from a FPL, as a someone who loves FPL and wants FPL to grow globally, and FPL Towers, if you're listening, I really wish FPL was bigger in Korea, and it's super sad that it's not, because you have Son, the superstar, out here right now, and this is the best way you can get these people and Koreans to really play this game. And the reason you don't play it is because of the time zone difference. I'm sort of crazy when it comes to time, but the reason is that you lose, as mentioned, once you get off to a bad start, or you don't have that flexibility to like change teams, and sometimes the casuals like played for 2 weeks and then lose focus and then want to play again in 2 weeks and then they're way behind, right? So I do agree with you. I wish there was a way, maybe a third wild card, I don't know, like some way where that if you get too busy in life and you lose focus on FPL for a second and you come back, there's a way to get back into it without being detrimental to your rank and score. I don't know actually what the way is, but I wish there was a way where it could get to more global of an audience than just the certain zones right now, especially because of the time zone. I'm very surprised that Australian managers are really into this, because their time zone is actually worse than ours. But yeah,
but is Premier League as popular? Is Premier League as popular? Are you saying that the Premier League game, so the FPL game needs to grow, or the Premier League itself needs to grow?
I think the Premier League needs to grow too, because it's mostly out here in East Asia. People just watch what teams they want to watch. But isn't it the same around the world, right? Like most people want to watch Manchester United, Chelsea, and City. So maybe it is the game itself that has to grow. It's just that sad, because I just think that people, if they understand what FPL is, and if they, like, especially my country, if they knew what this game was, this would be so popular. So yeah, it's just.
I think that the time zone
I want to do a
FPL.
Go ahead.
I was going to the time zone thing's interesting, because I mean there are things they could, if in theory, do to help with that. I mean, for example, you could have a transfer button that only goes through before the deadline if the player isn't injured, for example. So, if any last minute news comes in that a player's injured or stuff, then the transfer doesn't go through. But then again, sometimes you get lineup information that isn't officially recognised. And, I don't think there's anything they can do to kind of help with that kind of side of things. I mean, maybe they promote mini leagues more. Maybe they make it more fun for people who enter late. Create different targets, different types of overall ranking. I mean, they have, for example, the South Korean leaderboard, but how many people really check that? They could make a bigger thing of that, and you could have that as your overall rank, how you're doing against other South Koreans, rather than just the overall standings. There's things they could do. I think the time distance thing, though, is a problem.
As I think if you have any connections, this is the one thing that can make a big difference. Have you heard of the YouTuber Mr. Beast?
Yes.
He's obviously the biggest YouTuber in YouTube. And I was listening to a podcast where he basically said to expand his YouTube channel, he just changed the language and catered to different countries where people could understand what he was saying. FPL is all in English, and if they could translate it into Japanese, into Korean, I think there's a chance that people would be more able to understand what's actually going on here. So that's really unfortunate. It's not in our language at all, and the English is actually very difficult to understand for some people. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a good suggestion and a very good change. It definitely can become more global. You see, it's expanding with FPL meets, but this is all initiatives from us as managers, which is great to see. But I agree with you. I mean, the official FPL show, it can be translated and things like that, or the app can be in Korean and other languages. It's a global game, and it's only getting more global. So very good one. I think the one from me is similar to yours. I've always felt that the game can give us the ability to roll more than 2 free transfers. So again, it comes back to the way I play. I always, when I have 2 free transfers, I wish I could have had another one next week and I could have rolled 3. And it also helps with the disengaged manager. If they've had a 3 weeks vacation and they've come back, imagine having 4 free transfers, right? I think they need to be a cap, whether it's 3 or 4 or whatever, but it just kind of helps people who've disengaged from the game for a couple of weeks come back, and now you have some additional incentive to come back because you can get your 4 transfers. You can get Kane out for Salah and Haaland and change your team completely, all for free. So I think that would be my one change.
Yep, I like that. I think going up to three transfers wouldn't be a terrible idea, and I think it would help with that.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sure there's people going to be complaining about it. It changes the history of the game, blah, blah, blah. But like the game has to evolve somewhat, right? And I think that having 3 transfers makes it way more interesting, way more fun. Yeah.
2 hours and 20 minutes. I think we're nearly there.
My dog is now looking at me like, why the hell haven't we gone for a walk yet? Like, what is going on?
No, Az, thank you very much for joining. Andy, I'll let you say the final words, but final thing from me, again, just thanking everybody, the viewers, the listeners, people on Twitter, people on Scout, everyone who's given us so much love for this series. We will hopefully definitely be back next year. Really look forward, definitely. And we look forward to doing this all over again. And it's a season which will have different challenges, different chips, different strategies. And that's what we'll continue to do. So before I hand over to Andy, Az, anything from you?
No, nothing from me. Just again, awesome series. Love it. And yeah, you'll better be around next year, or have to get some other guys in who probably won't be as good.
No, we will. Go on, Andy, take it away.
Yep. Thank you, Pras, for a good season. I won't say much to you anymore because we've said goodbye like 50 times. To Az, you know how I feel about you, and thank you for giving us the platform to do this. And Scout as well. I'm always going to be grateful to FF Scout. So thank you to our viewers, everybody in the chat. I see some familiar faces. Joshua, I see you. Spartans, Wrangler, all good guys in the community. So I look forward to next season, but I also look forward to a long break and refreshing, and we'll be right back at it in the next 2 months. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.